Let's see here. Let's see if we're live or not. I think we're gonna wait till somebody jumps on, and
No worries.
I don't think we're live just yet. Uh,
No, I didn't get a notification.
what if we? She said just go ahead and press this play button down here.
Yeah.
She said go to live. Everyone can see and hear the play media file, and it will be recorded. So,
There it is. I got
Let's
it.
go.
you got it.
Yep.
Turn it down. We are live.
Let's go.
We are live. If anybody can hear us, if we have any listeners out there about to jump in, let us know how the audio sounds, and we're going to get this bad boy started.
Love it.
Anyone can send a message, just FYI. Sometimes we just like to wait a little bit and then let this thing populate so it hits some subscribers' back pockets there. Give out a little notification. Okay. All right. Well, while that's cooking, did it populate? You have the list.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I want to get a confirmation on how everything sounds. So I was just waiting for that.
Sure does look good, Bobby. You look handsome as ever.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'll tell you
thank
that.
Mhm.
I wish I had a head full of long hair. I don't think my genetic makeup qualifies me. I'm follically deprived. So
But that hat, that hat reminds me of the psilocybin guy that goes around and he does interviews based on different types of fungi.
yeah, it's a Terrence
I was
McKenna.
going to say Terrence McKenna sounds like something he'd
Yeah.
do.
Yeah. Terrence
Yeah,
McKenna
it's a
does
Terrence
it.
McKenna
Yeah.
hat, and it really sets a staple when that guy shows up to the party. If you're of a like mind, you can already know where the party's going to go.
Yeah.
Right.
You
Yeah.
already have people like inquiring, sir, are
Mhm.
you carrying anything special today?
Or have you visited anywhere
Special today.
special today? Today we have Bobby. I like to call him Bourbon Bobby, only because that's how I was kind of introduced to Bobby.
That's how
And
most people know me.
and Bill was the guy who introduced us first.
Yep.
And I mean, if you don't know who Bill is, you're missing out on a good podcast. But
You really are.
Bobby, we have I don't know how many bourbons on this table.
You?
And before we school people who absolutely know nothing about bourbon, and those that do, maybe it's some information in here they don't know. You surprise me every time with all the
Every
information.
I try.
Yeah.
Let's go in on who you are first, where you came from, how you grew up, and how in the hell did you get so educated on America's bloodline?
Well, born and raised in southern Michigan, right almost outside of Fremont, basically Indiana. I didn't do much. Middle of nowhere, BFE. Didn't have phone service. Didn't have internet. Ran on dial up. Saw more Amish buggies than I did cars, so I didn't Didn't stay home from school, didn't skip school because there wasn't a damn thing to do if I did.
Mhm.
Right.
We used to hang out with the Amish kids, but you can only do so much before not having electricity in your hand is not fun anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's definitely how you not make
Uh,
bourbon.
And then, I mean, I guess really I don't know when I started drinking bourbon, but it all kind of came in together once I started getting out of town and getting away from the Amish country, going out and trying to explore the world a little bit. And I was 16, and used to run over to Yogi Bear all the time. That was where I met people because there's
Yogi Bear, is that a campground?
Yep. Yogi Bear campground. So I'd hang out there, and then just like any other kid's story, I found a pint of Jack Daniels in my dad's, and I was like, "This is what I'm gonna take to Yogi Bear tonight."
Yeah.
And I liked the taste of whiskey more than I liked the taste of vodka or anything else. Vodka made me puke. Tequila made me puke and want to cry.
Make you get naked.
Yeah. Make you get on your feels.
Get real
quick.
strange, like
get
Bobby.
real strange real
And there's
quick,
that,
man.
and there's that song, "Tequila Will Make Your Clothes
It-
Fall Off."
Yeah,
it
yeah.
does.
Yeah.
Can your seat lower a little bit? Can it? A little?
No.
No, you're locked in there. Okay. The editor is always watching.
Yeah.
We have the editor she has a keen eye for symmetry, and
Yeah.
when something annoys
fair.
her,
It annoys her.
her.
Yeah.
We won't hear the last.
But-
of
If
it.
you hadn't have said anything, I would have noticed.
See?
But now
Yeah.
I
And
can,
that's
I can see it playing off a little bit. I'm
that's
like,
always the
"Oh."
case, Bobby.
And maybe I shouldn't have said shit. Maybe
Yeah.
I should not have
You
opened
should have
those
just
can
kept
of
it to
worms.
yourself. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Finish. What else was going on? Where was Yogi's at? Is that here
It's
in Indy?
Ohio, isn't it?
No,
it
right
isn't.
in Fremont.
Yeah, it is
Oh,
in
okay.
Indiana.
Right
Yeah.
off of
Okay.
120.
Okay.
And there's a few different Yogi Bear Jellystone parks like around the United States, but that one's, I believe, the biggest and most populated. People come from California just to go camp there. So I mean,
Right.
you always met different people, and that brought different kids grabbing different alcohols from their parents' coolers.
Yeah.
So
Right,
that
right.
was,
Yeah.
I mean, really camping at Yogi Bear with friends, even though I was 5 miles outside of it, that's really kind of where my whiskey love came to be. Because,
Mhm.
like I said, I tried vodka. I hated it. Not that it really tasted like anything, but you just feel like crap after drinking. But I don't care how much you pay for that vodka.
It's-
You're
yeah.
still going to feel
Yeah.
bad the next day.
Right.
But something about that Jack, even though today I hate Jack Daniels.
Yeah.
I do not like Jack. They did a Sinatra blend that I really liked. But other than that, hate Jack Daniels. But that's where my love of whiskey started. And then fast forward 15-ish years, and now I've got like 1,500 plus or minus amount of bottles of my own personal, and it's not a bad life.
It sounds like it. Yeah, it's not.
I mean, could you repeat that number
Yeah,
again? I
please.
mean, it just
I'm somewhere above or below a little bit, 1,500 bottles.
So, and people, when they come and see our bottles, they're blown away. And
Mhm.
sometimes I'm like, yeah, these are a lot of bottles.
Yep.
But now that you pose that like milestone of a number, we don't really have shit, do we?
no. I mean, we do. We do. He
I mean-
said we had an
But I mean, you'd be surprised, like that rabbit hole. I bet I've got 8 to 10 bottles of that unopened.
Right.
I mean, the OGD 114
hmm
had that at Meyer for like $24.99. So I pick up 3-4 of them.
Right.
Mhm.
I mean, there's a lot of things that I have multiples of.
Multiples of.
Right.
Okay. I see what you're saying.
But then people are mind blown when I tell them I don't have a single bottle of Blanton's.
Right.
The only
Right.
bottle of Blanton's I have is filled with Ancient Age out of a $18 half gallon.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, how do you not have any Blanton's?
Yeah. And here we are
Yeah.
sitting on like 20 bottles of it.
Right.
Yeah.
Wait, so I mean, okay, so your childhood wasn't really based on liquor per se. It was just something you kind of fell into.
Yeah,
Now-
I mean, I tasted some champagne when I was like 12, 13 on New Year's. Other
Mhm.
than that, I don't think I drank at all until I ended up going to Yogi.
Okay, so
'Cause
did you
I ran around with a pastor's kid. Let me preface with that. So there
Okay.
was never any
No.
opportunity for
Yeah.
that.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
When you run around with the
Right.
pastor's kid,
Mhm.
that says, see, now that can go a lot of different ways.
so there's no, so you have zero official education, like college programs or
Not a thing.
okay, no certificates or anything.
He's
Until-
autodidactic, one would say,
Yeah.
into his field.
I mean, that's a great
That,
description.
that is a great thing. Wait, real quick. Hello, Sarah Monroe, Matt Donna. I see you.
Oh, she decided to join the bourbon party.
Yeah, she's just she's like damn near family at this point.
Well, she is family.
Gotta love that.
Yeah.
Gotta love that.
Okay, so there's no college education. You taught yourself all of this. Now,
Yeah, for the most part, because I'm a registered executive bourbon steward out of the state of Kentucky, which is the highest. What's the word I'm looking for? The highest name, I guess you can get in
Yeah,
the bourbon.
yeah.
That's being like a
Highest title.
sommelier
Right.
tier, whatever they do with
Right.
wine and stuff. And that just allows me to be able to. I could certify you guys as bourbon stewards as well. I couldn't certify you as executives because you
Mhm.
got to go down. And that's where the college thing came in. Technically, I got a diploma that says Moonshine University,
Mhm.
mhm.
but I wouldn't say that's any like actual
Yeah,
college. I mean,
recognized.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. It's
Yeah.
not like the
Mhm.
highest of accolades you can
Yeah.
go and pick
Right.
up.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the words I was looking for.
Okay.
But
Mhm.
technically, that little diploma they gave me holds just as much merit as
Right.
me saying, "Hey, I'm an executive bourbon steward." At least there's something there to say, "Hey,
I know what I'm
yes,
talking about.
yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I guess not even technically, I could register anybody that I wanted. There's nothing that you would have to do except for go online, take a test, pass it with like I think an 85% or higher.
Mhm.
Mhm.
And then you get certified and you can say, "Hey, I'm a bourbon steward," blah 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 blah, which is still cool because there's really not that many of them.
Right.
And there was a stretch where I was the only one in the state of Indiana. When I worked at Gaze, I was like, "Hey, I know all this, but I would like to take this further." It was like a $1,500 class down in Kentucky, and they were
Yeah.
like, "When do you go?" And I'm
Yeah.
like,
Okay.
"Oh, that was a lot easier than what I thought it was gonna be."
And well, and for those that are not from Indiana, and I don't know how far the Gaze stretch. So when you hear us say the Gaze, this is a liquor store chain owned by Big Red
Yeah.
that are like commonly found throughout
Indiana.
Indiana. So I just want, because the first time I came here and they're like, "Yeah, I went and got some beer from the Gays." Well, me being me, I'm like, "Well, who are these gay couples you're getting beer from?" Truly, I must be missing out on something here, my good sir. They're like,
Yeah.
no, it's a store. It's called the Gays. And I was like, "Oh, you had me going for a minute there."
And they've got 5 stores. I guess the farthest south gay go is Auburn. I guess I don't know if Auburn or LaGrange would be farther south, but there's
Mhm.
one in LaGrange which would be the farthest west, and then Auburn would be the farthest south, and then everything else is just up by Angola.
Okay.
Okay.
But that's where I started. I got bored of working kitchens, and I wanted to do something with the whiskey that I enjoyed.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to have to move down to Kentucky and make that whole rigmarole. Well, I knew Cricket and Tony, who were the 2 owners that owned Gaze. I ran around with their kids, and next thing you know, I was there. Next thing you know, they were wanting to open up that new store. And then I ended up running it and doing all their bourbon, all their barrel selects, all the stuff that everybody else wished they could do.
Right.
And
Right.
I was right there in it, man. And it's really fun.
Where-
Yeah,
It's
it
been,
sounds like it.
Where has I mean, what kind of adventures has bourbon education led you down? Have you had a chance to meet a lot of interesting people behind it?
I have. And one of the best, Four Roses is probably of my favorite juices, just about anything.
Mhm.
And there was a man called Al Young who I guess you could just call him a spokesperson for Four Roses, or could. He passed away in Christmas Eve of 2021. And him and Jimmy Russell from Wild Turkey and Al Young from Four Roses are probably 2 of the most well-named
Right. Iconic
who are
figures.
still alive.
Yeah.
I went down to go do a Four Roses barrel pick in 2019, and open the barrel select room door, and there's Al Young. He's always got a cheesy, I don't know if he had a stroke or what it was, but it was always one of those half cocked smiles. He's smiling, but one of them, it was just flat. And I, I literally almost crapped myself. I couldn't believe that I was about to sit there and drink whiskey with Al Young. And
Right.
I mean, that was one of the cooler things I've ever done. But I've also gotten to go to like all the distilleries, but I didn't
Mhm.
have to be in a group of 15, 20 people. It was me and one other person or just me, and I got to really see things that other people don't get to see.
Right.
Well, they could if they spent extra money, but I was just there on company card and enjoying myself.
Right.
So I mean, I've gotten to see a lot, and I've gotten to do all those distilleries without having to pay a bill for the trail and get on a bus and ride around with a bunch of other people and wait
Right.
in
Right.
line and like
And
people going to Buffalo Trace and waiting 4 hours for the front
right.
doors to open.
Right.
Right.
And this is the Bourbon Trail we're speaking of. So for
Mhm.
those that are watching it, you can actually go to Kentucky and they have tours that takes you through all the distilleries, commonly known as the Bourbon Trail.
Yep.
So let's start with this.
Okay.
When did bourbon actually become such a staple for America? What happened to bourbon? Like, what did bourbon go through to be as prevalent
Or where
today?
did, yeah, but or how did more so how did it start?
Right.
Some would tell you, truthfully, it came back from way back when the Native Americans were using a Mexican grass. That's what they had. That's the grain that they had. While it also fed and did everything for, I don't know if you call it the United States as far back as that started, but then like the mid 1700s, you start seeing George Washington became the largest distiller.
Mhm.
And at the time, rye was the big crop all over the place. So he started using rye, and that's where rye whiskey became super prevalent, even over bourbon. Well, when the president of the United States is distilling rye whiskey, you love it. And I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean that's what you had. And then moving forward from that, uh, it just became a staple, especially with towards the late 1700s, sugar became tough to get your hands on, which made rum production almost obsolete.
Wow.
So everywhere else was trying to, hey, what are we going to do? Well, Georgie's over here making an ass load of rye whiskey. Why don't we just start growing rye and doing this? And then I wish I could remember the guy's name. It'll come to me at some point, but he started experimenting with different grains, corn, barley, and everything that we know today as the staple to bourbon.
The mash
And
bill.
the
Yeah.
mash bill.
Yep.
And today, by law, bourbon can't be a bourbon unless it's at least 51% corn.
Right.
Doesn't matter what you do with the rest of it, at least as long as it's 51% corn. To whereas back when George Washington was doing rye whiskeys, the term bourbon was kind of just thrown out there. It's like Japanese whiskey 4 years ago. You could take pretty much anything, throw it in a barrel as long as it came out of Japan, and they could call it a Japanese whiskey. And there's nothing saying that they can't call it a Japanese whiskey.
Right.
But you used to be able to pick them up for 7,500 bucks. Well, now that they put laws and regulations into it, they're having to spend extra money to get all these grains.
Hmm.
Like a Hibiki 18, you used to be able to pick up for 150 bucks.
Mhm.
It's an $850 bottle now, just because it has to be, because they can't afford to just take soju or whatever they have and throw it in a barrel called Japanese whiskey.
Right.
It was the same with bourbon until things started to get taxed. That was when everything started to kind of take a downward slope.
Right.
Nobody wanted tax. Same thing happened with the tea.
Right.
And then they pretty much, it was prohibition.
Yeah.
Well, 6 distilleries during prohibition
Hmm.
were still able to sell it
Hmm.
with a medicinal card. So you would get prescribed whiskey. No different from at that time. They were prescribing people cocaine for pain. Cocaine and whiskey was as crazy as it sounds, that's, oh, you got a headache, your back hurts.
Yeah.
Here's some cocaine and whiskey.
Yeah.
Shoo, and that's what they did.
Well, I figured there had to be some science behind it. If you didn't abuse the properties, it actually did something for you, correct?
From what I understand, yeah, because it
Okay.
was big in Cold War. The Cold War, there, if anyone got hurt out in the field or whatnot, whiskey 9 times out of 10 was going to be what was prescribed to that soldier. Either, if I remember it word for word, it was until the pain stops,
Mhm.
or as much as you can handle and handle your rifle.
Hmm.
And that was how they prescribed it. It wasn't, hey, take a sip. It was as needed till it stops hurting, or as much as you can handle while still being able to handle your rifle.
Wow.
Which in my mind is
A functioning
a
alcoholic.
functioning
Yeah,
alcoholic
yeah.
with an AK-47.
Yeah.
There's nothing crazier than that.
America at its
America
finest.
for sure.
Gee, so and so walk me down that. So who were some of the big? I know Old Forester was one of the bigger.
Forrester, pretty much anything that Brown Foreman has now
Mhm.
kind of did. I know Woodford was in on that. I know
Is
the
this
old,
all pre-prohibition, or are these companies
this
all
is
post?
the ones that we're trying to name are pre and during.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
once prohibition hit, everyone wanted to apply to be able to get that medical
Medicinal
license
license.
to
Yep.
be able to put it out.
Okay.
But if I remember right, only 6 were able to get it.
Hmm.
Okay.
And I could be wrong again, but I think only 3 or 4 of them exist to this day.
Right.
Which Old Forester,
Hmm.
Woodford Reserve,
Hmm.
I think. Well, Old Taylor doesn't Buffalo
Buffalo Trace. Yep.
went from Old Taylor to Ancient Age Distillery to Buffalo, what it is today. So technically, I guess they're not in there. I can't remember the other one, but it's one of those that you just don't hear about very
Right.
often. So there's very few that are still there. I've got up on my wall. It's a whole list of everyone the day they got shut down from
Mhm.
when Prohibition started, which ones have the medicinal license, what day they got it issued, how many barrels worth they had sold or prescribed to people throughout the course of Prohibition and seen. And I wish I had that in front of me right now so I could tell you. The problem with knowing a bunch of stuff is sometimes it all just gets jumbled into.
Right.
So,
Right.
so one of our commenters is asking, does bourbon originate from France or Kentucky?
So France, so that goes back to natives up in France, and they use that Mexican grass.
Right.
They had made their way up towards what we now call the States, down. Either way, they were basically just outside of Mexico at the time, and then they started using, it was like called Teocin, Tochin. Couldn't
Mhm.
tell you how to pronounce it, but
Mhm.
that was the Mexican grass I was talking about in the beginning, and it's what they used. So technically, it's got its French. I don't want to say French heritage, and I also don't want to say it comes from France,
Okay.
but it definitely doesn't just come from Kentucky.
Right.
That's just where Kentucky ended up just being, as far as agriculture goes, they seen that corn grew the best and most plentiful through Kentucky, and then they've got the rich limestone water, and that limestone water they realized made the best whiskey. Didn't matter if it was rye, didn't matter if it was a bourbon, didn't matter. So they started making these distilleries close to either the river that ran through it, or they would dig lake beds that sat on that rich limestone, and that's where Kentucky really became the bourbon mecca. And there's still people to this day that think it's not a bourbon if it doesn't come from Kentucky. You can't have a bourbon out of Utah. You can't have a bourbon out of Indiana. There's still people that truly believe it can only come from Kentucky. But some of the better stuff I've had in my life doesn't even come from Kentucky.
What if the mash bill is in Vegas, but they rick it in Kentucky?
Say that again.
So Smoke Wagon
Mm-hmm.
is from Nevada. Is it the recipe from Nevada? Did they Did they make the recipe in Nevada and they rigged it in Kentucky? And that's
Smoke Wagon's MGP juice, though, isn't it?
Yeah, so that's already in
Yeah.
Kentucky. It's already in the belt.
okay. So
No.
No, it's not.
MGP comes from Lawrenceburg, Indiana,
Oh, okay.
which actually, fun fact, more than 50% of the corn that goes into Kentucky bourbon is all corn that comes from us in the state of Indiana. Less than 2 hours from here.
which we're a part of MGP.
Pretty much, yes.
Okay, explain MGP.
Multi-grain products is, oh God, I'm trying to think of the number of bottles roughly, but there's so many different bottles that you can pick up on a shelf, look on the back, and it says distilled in Indiana. 9 times out of 10, they're not going to say it comes from MGP, but if it says distilled in Indiana, bottled, aged here, it's probably MGP. And MGP has probably some of the most sought after juice, the better juice. And some people say that that's because of where they're aging stuff. Problem with some places in Kentucky, they've got 13-story rickhouses. Well, it's already 100 degrees down there. You take a 13-story building with no ventilation, and it's going to be pushing 150, 160 in there.
Right.
That's why you get a lot of hot stuff out of some of those distilleries, because you've got a full barrel that's just water and whiskey sitting in 150 degrees for 4 years. Only one of those things are going to leak out of the barrel and go up and evaporate, and that's going to be the water. So
Yeah.
then when you take out the water, your alcohol content's going from, let's say they watered it down to 125 proof or a full proof, but it sits there and ages for 4 years. That 125 is going to go up to 130, 140, 150,
Right.
which is what Jack Daniels kind of tried to do with their Coy Hill. They found the absolute highest and hottest point that they could do, and they were pulling 140s and 150s. Like
Okay.
purely hazmat.
Okay, so that exiting out of prohibition,
Mhm.
okay? When did the government step in about how hot a drink was going to be? Why did BIB even become a thing? Was that the only way bourbon can be existing is through the government?
Technically, yes, because you can't even make a label without it getting approved through the TTP, which is basically the government coming in and saying, hey, we want a tax for you to make that label, and so on and so forth. But pretty much, yeah. Unfortunately, nothing we love and enjoy exists without the government, but they really, really like to get into our alcohol. And after Prohibition, it kind of was a little bit of a wasteland.
Mhm.
It was a little bit of a wasteland before Prohibition.
Mhm.
I mean, you could do whatever you wanted. Well, now that Prohibition's out, they had to make all these different rules. I mean, people were killing themselves on booze because it was basically like drinking Everclear. It didn't matter. It came right out of the still and they were drinking it.
Which is your white dog closely too, right? Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your white dog is basically Everclear. It's just a grain neutral spirit. But well, Indiana's Everclear is at 190. Michigan and Ohio can only go to 150,
Mhm.
which both of those are more proof than I have weight to my entire body soaking wet in the middle of the summer. So,
Mhm.
I wouldn't want to drink them anyways. Plus, anything that's over 130, I find a real hard time getting any flavor out of there. I
Right.
almost
'Cause
have to
it's
have
so
an ice
hot.
cube.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's so hot. And this probably leads to for another question that I posed, but one of our commenters is saying, can you where does gin originate and how would you compare the value of bourbon versus gin? But see, and I know where this is going, Bobby. So what happened to bourbon when the more clear spirits started to approach?
Clear spirits were easy to make and didn't take much to make. Whereas once
gonna
we
scoot this
started
a
getting
little.
into the bourbon, we ended up, you got to be 51% corn. Then you also got to have a secondary grain. And then usually you'll have a third grain, which would be that malted barley and stuff like that.
Mhm.
Well, your vodka, some of them are just corn. I think Tito's is just a corn. I really don't know much about vodka. I love gin, and I know that that's all basically just botanical.
A juniper tree, I think that's
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
Yep. And I love gin. I mean, I love, love, love gin. I can sit here and drink half a bottle of Rabbit Hole with you guys and be great. We'll sit here and kick it. You give me one gin martini, I am red in the face. I am slurring my word. I
Yeah.
love my gin,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I can't handle it at all.
Oh, yeah.
And I
Mhm.
wish I could lay more into gin and the botanicals because they use so many different stuff. They can
So,
use rose petals and the juniper, and
oh, yeah, yeah.
but
What's
then
the,
they've got bourbon barrel finished gin, and then they've got gin finished bourbons, and the gin world's
it's
odd,
vast. Yeah.
very, very,
Yeah.
very vast. I think the whiskey world's vast, but gin's just as crazy.
Let's go there. Like you said, before we get so, and I know that was a big separation where
Mhm.
bourbon kind of took a downhill.
Yep.
Just tell me about why bourbon is bourbon and why whiskey is whiskey.
Well, technically, they're both whiskey.
Well,
Yes.
but there's a certain
Okay.
There's the saying that all bourbon is whiskey, but not all whiskey is bourbon.
correct.
And that goes back into that 51% corn. My big one that I like to tell people that is Bernheim, the $30 weeder out of Heaven Hill.
Yeah.
It's not a bourbon because it does not hit that 51% corn, but it tastes just as good as any other weeded bourbon I've ever had in my life.
Hmm.
It just doesn't hit 51% corn, so they legally can't call it, so they have to just call it a whiskey.
Hmm.
But then whiskey goes into, you've got Scotch whiskey, Irish whiskey, Welsh whiskey, Indian whiskey. I mean, you name the country, there's probably a whiskey there. And fun fact with that too, whiskey and whiskey are two different whiskeys. You got whiskey with an E, and then you got whiskey without. WHISKY, WHISKEY.
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Hmm.
So, and the easiest way to tell if there's going to be an E in whiskey is if there's an E in the country, there's an E in the name.
Okay.
So, United States has got an E. All of your bourbons are going to have an E in whiskey except for Maker's Mark. And Maker's Mark has family heritage in Scotland. So Maker's Mark is the only American bourbon that does not have an E in whiskey so that they can show homage to their Scottish roots. So then Scotch, there's no E in Scotland or Scotch. So all of your Scotch whiskeys, there is no E in whiskey. And most people don't even, like I said, you don't register that there's not that E in there when you're looking. You just know that it's whiskey.
Hmm.
And that's something that most people don't even know is that whiskey and whiskey just
Mhm.
depends on what country or what kind of whiskey you're getting. And part of that, there's a lot of shared qualities between bourbon and scotch, I think, outside of the fact that it tastes like dirt and aluminum smeared around some dead minnows. Other that's
That's very appetizing, Bobby.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's also different regions of the island out in Scotland too, so your scotches are going to taste different
Right.
depending on where they're at, and you don't really get that too much with bourbon outside of your heat. I mean, you've had Garrison Brothers. Garrison Brothers hot, but it's got good flavor.
Mhm.
Right.
That goes back to they've got rick houses, but it's already 120 degrees down in Texas. You age them for 4 years at the top of a 10-story rick house, they're going to be hot.
Yeah.
But then you get some places that have actual climate control with ACs and whatnot. Their barrels don't get over 80 degrees over the course of 4 to 6, 10, whatever old they age it. And that's going to come off almost like a chill filtered
Hmm.
whiskey,
Mhm.
which I won't even get into that. Chill filtered whiskey is not the way to go. Tastes great, but you lose all the great flavor. Kind of the same way with Jack, but Jack is technically a bourbon. I don't care. I want to throw that out there. All
Mhm.
I've got, Jack Daniels is a bourbon, regardless of what anybody says.
Right.
Okay. But what about, okay, take me now. I'm trying to inch past prohibition in the government. Bottled and bond.
Bottled in bond.
Why did the government have to throw that in? Why regulate that? If bourbon was an open game, then it didn't have to be a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year
Mhm.
to be a bourbon, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Up to a certain point in time to where it at least had to be 2 years. It had there as we inch past that and get past the BIBs, I'll explain more into how they started to be like, okay, it has to be this old. It has to be aged in America with the white oak for this long. There's over the course of the years, they added little things to what makes a bourbon, to where you used to really just be able to distill whatever you wanted to do, throw it in some wood, and then it was a bourbon. And then one guy, they say he stored his whiskey in some wood barrels, and the only wood barrels he had got caught in a fire in his house fire. He said, "Oh well, I got to have somewhere to store it," and that's where charring the barrels before putting the white dog in there came from. Which
interesting.
that's
Well, now see now there, Bobby, you opened up a story that most people don't know. So you're gonna have to educate like the barrel process.
It's a story.
That's a story. Yeah,
That's a story.
It's okay.
There's some people will tell you that that is exactly the reason that they char barrels. You talk to people that work in the industry down in Kentucky, they will tell you that's a story.
It's hogwash.
That's just hogwash. Some guy didn't just take a burnt barrel out of his house, fill it with whiskey, and wait. That's sure it could happen, but that's not how it happened. Kind of the same thing. There was a lot of experimenting going on, especially after, because during Prohibition, they were pouring barrels and barrels and barrels down storm drains. And I mean, it's not like these guys just had warehouses of their barrels waiting till Prohibition ended. They had to start over.
Oh my
so
God.
There was a lot of experimenting going on and saying, we could do this. Let's put them here. Let's go higher in these rick houses. And the bottle and bond came, the 100 proof was like magic for everybody. But there was also an issue with rating the proof of bourbon back then. And a way to do that was to put things in a government bonded warehouse. Everything was checked, watched. It's not like you could just throw it in a bottle and say, hey, this is 100 proof, but there's 130 proof in there. And I don't even know what a government bonded warehouse is anymore. I mean, I've seen people putting them in red barns and they're like, it's a government bonded warehouse and they can call it a bottle and bond. And I know there's a guy down here in Indiana that does it. It's a red barn that's been on his property for 30 years, but it's a government bonded warehouse. I don't know how that works anymore. I don't know if they go there every 6 months and say, okay, this is up to whatever code they've got. But it pretty much was just the government really trying to get their foot in there and make a little bit more money.
Oh, so does the government go to the actual master distiller and say, let me feed this barrel with you and make sure?
I don't think so.
Okay. So there's no, so the government is not even testing the proof per se.
No, I don't, that's just not what it is anymore. But
there has to be a record of it.
There has to be a record of it.
Right.
There is a record of that barn with the government stating that there's however many gallons per year can fit in that through 4 years course, and they'll figure out over a course of 4 years how many gallons is this guy making, and then they're going to figure out how to tax the crap out of you on it, and then that's pretty much it. They don't care anything after that. But bottled and bond for some reason is like Blanton's to people. You hear a bottled and bond, everybody wants to flock to it. Bottled and bond's where it's at. Once New Riff really came out, I still think they're one of the better bottle and bonds around. Truthfully, New Riff just does it good.
Yeah, we should have brought one and put it out here so they can see it.
But why would the government settle on 100 proof?
Well, that was just for the bottle and bond.
Okay.
The 100 proof money mark kind of came from the people more than it did the government.
So what is the government rule on a bottle and bond?
It has to be 4 years old, aged in a government bonded warehouse, and that's pretty much it. Like, those are the two real big things to be able to call it a bottle and bond.
And 51% corn or
51% corn. That's required for any bourbon.
For any bourbon.
Okay.
Any bourbon.
Okay.
And that could be 99% corn and 1% barley. It can be 100% corn As long as it's at least 51% corn, you can call it a bourbon. Doesn't matter where it's from. But then it's got to be at least 2 years old to be called a straight bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously it's got to be in whatever state it's in. We'll just use Kentucky for the ease of it. In order to be called a Kentucky straight bourbon whiskey, it's got to be at least 2 years old.
Mm-hmm.
Those 2 years at least got to be aged in Kentucky. It's got to be in a charred oak white barrel. It doesn't necessarily have to be white oak. It's just a charred oak barrel. There's all sorts of different oak that Buffalo Trace has experimented. They have an experimental collection. They do them in half pints. They just use different kind of woods, which you think Pappy or the BTAC series is hard to get your hand on. They're impossible. So that's
bottled in bond, basically.
yeah. But
we have outliers now. We have above 100 proof. We have above 4 years. We have mixed,
and we've got belows though too. But the lowest that it can be is 80 proof. It has to at least be 80 proof to be considered a bourbon.
Okay.
And it can go into the barrel. It can be distilled at up to 160. And then it has to be below that once it's barreled, which obviously there's things that are above 120, 130, 140. And once it's barreled, everything after that kind of doesn't matter. Once you get that angel share and all that water starts evaporating out, of course your alcohol content's going to go higher. Well, there's nothing they can do about it after that. It's not like they altered it themselves. It's just, it happened.
It's the environment.
It's
Mother
environment.
Nature.
It's the environment.
Okay.
Which I hate those because, like I said, once you hit that like 130s and up, it's just all heat. There's no flavor. You have to use an ice cube, and they're all like $250, $300 for something that just tastes like fire. Hate it.
Right.
But, we got a comment real quick. I want to get some of these the questions. If you had to describe the emotion of a bourbon in small amount of words, how would you do that?
The emotion of a bourbon?
Oh, that's a good one.
Wow. That would depend on how my day's going at that particular point in time.
Yeah, it's like user it's like user preference, right?
Yeah. I mean, if I'm having a bad day, I know there's particular bourbons that I'll drink if I'm having a bad day, because I'm like 130, 132 pounds, somewhere in there.
Right.
If I'm having a rough day, I'll pull out that E.H. Taylor's 136 proof.
Right.
I need one glass.
Yeah.
I don't need 6 or 7 put out through. I need it now.
You don't need a 6-pack, 12-pack of beer. You could just get the problem solved right then and there.
I guess that's a really good question. It really just depends on how I'm feeling that day.
Yeah.
But I've never really drank. I don't open one thing and then go through until it's empty, really. I have a few sips, I move on to another bottle, and I might not see that bottle for 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And it
I'll tell you the emotion I get when I do drink. It's very open. It's a very open emotion, and the truth comes out. And then if I don't keep up with the habits, then it's like a natural depressant for me, and I'll just go to sleep, sir. I'll just be like, well, it's a great conversation, but if we don't continue with this drinkage, I will go rest my face now.
That's one thing that when I start drinking whiskey, I wake up. That's the unfortunate part for me.
Oh, no.
I start to wake up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't it funny how it hits different people, you know? Okay. So we got past the BIB and we got past kind of the outliers.
Okay.
Now, there was something interesting that was brought up to me, and I didn't quite understand this. Help me understand why a rick house is going to be different from someone else's rick house. If you're in Kentucky and there's thousands of rick houses, what makes one better than the other? Some people swear by, so Old Maysville Club, he's a one guy operation. He has nowhere to rick his rise. He convinced Willett to allow him to rick his products there.
Yep.
And people say, oh, well, now it's going to taste like a Willet product. Like, does this whole weight, does it matter where you rick this stuff? Or is it just like how you said, the mash bill, the water,
the mash bill, I would say matters the absolute most.
Mhm.
You've got, let's just say Buffalo Trace, which you can't necessarily confirm that it's a 75, 10, 15 mash bill, but
explain that.
75, 10,
Explain
15.
that. Explain the mash bill.
So we'll use Buffalo Trace, 75% corn, 10% malted barley, 10% or 15%. Ooh, I think the 15 is actually malted barley. Corn, rye, barley. So 75, 10 rye, 15 malted barley. That is, as far as you talk to anyone that's been into bourbon or just got into bourbon, Buffalo Trace is probably going to be some of their favorite stuff that they've ever had, or Blanton's or Eagle or something along their line.
Mhm.
And that 75, 10, 15 bill goes across, I believe, Buffalo, Eagle, Ancient Age, Stag, maybe. I think Stag Junior. Anyways, and that's all. Guess and check. It was like I said, after Prohibition, everyone just tested things.
Right.
It didn't. No one necessarily was just like, okay, let's just do 51% corn and then dabble this out. People, they were distilling all sorts of different ratios of corn to barley to rye. There's 100% corns. There's 100% rye. And to a point, it doesn't matter because you could get corn from, so I'm sure somewhere on all four of us, there's a field of corn growing right now because of where we're at. But
Right.
that corn's going to taste different from corn down, let's say, in Lawrenceburg. And then you've got your different kinds of corns. You got your bloody red butcher corns. You've got your, what's the blue corn out of Texas? We'll just call it blue corn. There's a bunch of different corns too. Different corn's going to taste different. We got a guy, Jason Fruits, down in Newton, Indiana. He's one of the only guys that has a 100% sweet corn.
Mhm.
That sweet corn bourbon is just an absolute treat. I mean, when you taste, have you ever had the mellow corn? It's nothing but corn. It's 100%
Right.
corn.
Heaven Hill product.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it tastes like corn.
Yeah,
It
right.
absolutely tastes like corn. And then as you start to back away percentage of corn and start to add rye, you start to get that corn flavor with a little bit of that heat that's associated with the rye.
Mm-hmm.
Then you add in that barley and it adds that little bit of malt flavor, that easier, I don't want to say sweet, but sweeter taste. So
That's where that chocolate can come from, correct? Just the
Yep.
malt.
So
Okay.
you're taking this corny flavor, you're trying to ease it with that rye, and then you're trying to ease both of those with that malted barley. And again, that just came from guessing and checking from people. Okay, this 72%, 12, 17, which it would be if they just backed down that Buffalo Trace by 2% on each. They could have said, this just tastes terrible. Let's try 75, 10, 15. The next thing you know, they're sitting there, ages a year, they try it. 2 years go by, 3 years go by, 5 years go by. That 6th year that goes by that they've been waiting to hit, they're like, okay, this is good. And that could all just be from a 2% change in how much grain you're using. Now, the next biggest thing is going to be your ricks. Depending on where it is racked in a rick house, kind of matters based off of the heat and the temperature. Like I said, like if you were down in Texas in a 13-story rick house and you've got a barrel at the very top, that's going to be hot because it's probably like 200 degrees in there 5 months out of the year. Now, there's a lot of rick houses built across Kentucky, and if you look at them, they are down in basically just holes.
Mhm.
They got them at the lowest point to where the highest point of the rick house isn't going to be extremely hot. Well, there's also places that think Barton, for example, they do 1792 and all that. They have a palletized rack house. So instead of it just having a barrel width length and then they roll down and they pop them off, they're standing straight up on pallets, 9 to a pallet, and then they just stack them. And they think that the airflow from that,
Mhm.
the air is able to flow easier. It keeps it cooler in there. Does it? I couldn't tell you. I can tell you it's a hell of a lot harder to get a barrel down here when you've got 38 more of them stacked on top of each other on
Right.
pallets right there.
Right.
Whereas you could take barrel 38C from Buffalo Trace and they're going to be able to walk to exactly where it's at, move 2 barrels, and then you've got it. And they know over the course of time where, let's just say Blanton's for the warehouse age. That is the only warehouse that Blanton's is aged in. And it's a metal edged rick house. You guys know how I feel about Blanton's. It's given me more headaches in my life than I've had them.
Yep.
They're good. I've got all the horses. I've got all the gold horses.
Right.
But like I said earlier, I mean, you used to be able to get it. Now
Right.
you can't. I went
Right.
to the bridge to Canada and picked them up for the golds for 42 American. Went up to Windsor, gambled a little bit, came back, grabbed a couple more golds.
Right.
But now, God, they're what? 150, 175 for a gold.
Mhm.
Yep.
But and people think that if it wasn't in that warehouse H where it's at, Blanton's wouldn't taste as good. But
So
then that also hits me with Blanton's as a single barrel.
Yeah.
Everyone can say they love Blanton's, it's the best, it's the best, it's the best. Well,
It
every
can't
bottle
be
they-
if it's a single barrel. You're
every
not
bottle
getting
it's going to be
yes,
different.
It's going to be a
Right.
different bottle.
Which is the part that kills me the most on it is, oh my
Right.
God, Blanton's. Well, the one you had was pretty good. Have you ever had a bad? Yeah, I've had a couple of bad ones.
Yeah, I've had some stinker Blantons,
Yep.
and we had one here. It was a little grenade store pick. I don't know if you picked it. I'm not knocking anybody,
Probably.
but it was not like my favorite.
Mhm.
Like I have one right now at home in Pennsylvania, and I opened it up this
Yep.
past weekend, and I can tell you right now, and I never had this on a palate, right? Apple Jolly Ranchers is the first note that I got from this Blanton.
That's
It's
rough.
such a easy sipper, and it was
Mhm.
no, for me it was delicious.
Whew.
It was sweet. It had like all the perfect caramel flavoring,
Mhm.
and the smell afterwards was just bonkers.
Hmm.
And 15 minutes after that, when you let it sit, it even blossoms more. And I go, this is the bottle that keeps giving. And my profile could be just my profile, but I'm sure I like to think we all know what a bad bourbon tastes like.
Oh, absolutely,
yeah.
absolutely.
If I brought it here, you would be like, yeah, I didn't get that, but yeah, I can
Yep.
I can tell that this is a good bottle. Like
Yep.
for me, a shit bottle of bourbon would be something that he would enjoy. And I know where you know I don't
I know where he's going with this.
What is it?
And I just like the corn flavor is Castle and Key product that they
Which
took the
one?
old Taylor.
Oh, yep.
Yes.
They're
Yeah.
all right.
No,
Yeah.
Castle and Key to me is it's pure shit. It's
Yeah.
like they got the corn dust off the floor and they're utilizing a Taylor distillery, right? You're
Yep.
giving Taylor a bad name.
Right.
I'm not the only one. Do the legwork.
Mhm.
Statistics show that Castle and Key, that particular run was shit. Now, I don't know if they made adjustments, right? We won't know until, I don't know what, 2-3 years
I
from
mean,
now.
it was okay. So I forget her name. She made the mash bill, or she's the master distiller at Castle and Key, correct? Or one of. There's a woman behind it that.
Yeah, I forgot her name. If and real quick, for people that are watching and that are going to watch this later, to catch you up on a lot of this of what we're talking about, and you're even remotely interested in bourbon, I would have you watch a documentary called Neat.
Fantastic.
And I don't know if what that's streaming on anymore.
That
it was
woman on
Hulu.
Castle, that woman involved with Castle and Key is
Right.
on that
It's-
documentary.
Yeah, she's one of the
Neat.
People being interviewed. So you get a chance, go watch Neat, brush yourself up on some American history as far as bourbon. because there's no way we're going to be able to teach the masses in a few short minutes. But
Do they talk about the Pappy Thief and Neat? I can't remember.
in terms like that, okay, you're going to have to. I would like you for just explain what thieving a barrel means.
Oh, I'm talking actually stealing.
No, like but when
Yeah.
you go and do like a bourbon pick or a barrel pick,
Yo,
explain what that is.
oh man. So this kind of ties into the rick house and the aging and how different barrels can be.
Mm-hmm.
This day and age, it is called the golden standard. If you buy a bottle of Buffalo Trace at your local Meyer, and you buy a bottle of Buffalo Trace at a Meyer 100 miles away, they are going to taste the same.
Okay.
Now, that golden standard, they've got someone there and they blend barrels and taste and blend and taste until they're like, okay, this is what Buffalo Trace is supposed to be like. So they are always going to taste the same. But when we go down, or when I went down and then I did single barrel picks, the most bottles you can get out of a 53-gallon standard barrel is like 254, I think. And that is absolutely filled to the complete top, which the only people that really do that is Maker's Mark, because they take their cast strength and then they top it off. I mean, once it's aged, they just put in, it's usually only down by like that much. They fill it back to the top and then they bottle it. You're going to get the most bottles out of Maker's Mark, but they do it a little different. We can talk about that another time. But when they're in a rick house, let's say I'm going to build a rick house. It's going to be 25 barrels wide and we're going to go 10 stories high, and we'll go 25 back. So 25 wide, 25 back, 10 high. If I filled all of those barrels, we'll just say the first 5 barrels, we filled them within the last hour. They all got put in at the exact same time. They've all been sitting there for 4 years. The barrel closest to out here towards the door is going to taste completely different from the barrel to its left, which is going to taste, all 5 of those barrels are going to be so vastly different. And the smallest of temperature changes can do that. This barrel that's sitting next to the one next to the door, you might not be able to see it when you walk past it, but if it's 75 degrees right here in front of this barrel, it's probably 78 degrees in front of this barrel. Now, that doesn't seem like much, but over the course of 4, 6, 8, 10, however many years,
It adds up.
It adds up. And that's what's cool about single barrels is the odds of you trying something that tastes the same as another one is very, very slim.
Very, very
And
slim.
that in itself is an allocation, correct?
That in itself is an allocation, because that is going to be a one-time run. You're going to get 250 bottles max of this. It's not ever going to taste the same, which single barrel store picks kind of, this is a stretch to some people, but I truly believe that the single barrel store pick ruined bourbon for people like us that actually like to drink it.
Right.
You used to be able to get Knob Creeks for $39 or $49.99. You still can, but you're going to be at about 9.5 years old. You used to be able to go down and pick a barrel. You might pick a 14-year-old Knob Creek, and it's still going to be $50. But people were buying these 15, 16-year-old barrel picks for $40, $50. Oh, there's only one barrel, and then they'd throw it on some random secondary site on Facebook for $400. Oh, it's an older one. You don't get them anymore. Well, they stopped. A lot of these places didn't do that anymore. Elijah Craig was the same way. When I was at Gaze, we had a 13-year-old Elijah Craig. It's a 6-year bourbon. You double the age and you're still picking it up for $29.99. A 13-year-old,
Right.
$30.
Right.
Crazy.
Right.
Well, you don't get that anymore with the Elijah Craig either. They're pretty much right at 6.5 years old, and that's as far as you get. And it sucks. Yeah, people complain and bitch and moan, but I get it, because people wanted to make money. Back when it used to be your Buffalo Trace products, your Pappy and whatnot, and that is the only way you made money. Well, then you start getting all these California spirits or breaking bourbons, and like that Henry McKenna up front, that was all day single barrel 10-year, $30. all day, every day. Well, in 2018, it got rated whiskey of the year. You can't find it for under $60 now, if you can find
If you
it.
could find it.
Okay, so
And that was a bottom shot. You
Okay.
had to really reach down to grab that bottle.
and that's gonna and that's gonna take me into what makes an allocated bourbon versus your standalone bourbons.
That comes into that golden standard.
Right.
You can have as many Buffalo Trace as you want. I mean, it doesn't matter. There's enough barrels there. They're continually going to be able to blend and make that. Whereas some of them they craft, as much as I hate to, let's just say they're pappy.
Mm-hmm.
That's what some people call the top of the line weeded bourbon. It's to me, it's just another weeder. It's good. I've had them. They're worth, like the 10-year, worth every bit of $60 retail. I've never found them for 60, but well, I have, but I worked there, and I'm not that shady that I'm just going to take all the pappy off the shelf. But
Right.
And it's tough because there's a number in their head, I don't know what it is, of how many barrels they want to fill and age as Pappy Van Winkle in a year. They know how many they want to put in that rick house.
Mm-hmm.
And they know how many they're hoping to have at the end of 6 years, 10 years, 12 years. And I say 6 and 10 and 12 because Weller is the same exact mash bill as your Van Winkles.
Mm-hmm.
Just is your Weller green label. That's not green, that's black.
Mm-hmm.
I'm colorblind. That's bad.
That's a 12
But I
year.
remember that we
Yep.
grabbed the 12. I'm like, okay, that's not the green label. That one's 6, the 107 6, and then you get up to your 12-year. And the 12-year, which some people will say isn't true, but it's rejected lot B12.
Mm-hmm.
They taste it. If they don't think it's up to standard for a lot B12 Pappy, it gets
reduced to the 12 year.
It gets put into that Weller 12, which you used to be able to get for $34.
Yeah, which is
Another one
still
of them things.
which is outside the price, is still a highly sought after bottle.
Very, very highly sought after. And it always has been. I've got the old squatty bottles from like the late 80s, early 90s.
Mhm.
And those are some of the only bottles I've never opened. Is just old stuff that you don't get.
Mm-hmm.
But those are going for $600.
Mm-hmm.
I paid $85 online, shipped to my door for free.
Right.
Wow.
And I could have opened it to try it just because it's the older Stitzel Weller juice, whereas now it's Buffalo Trace juice. Yes, they're different. But I just thought they looked cool. And now I look at them, I'm like, damn, that's worth a lot of money. And I'm just staring at it as much as I really,
Right.
really want to open it.
Right. And that's the other thing, like I want to get to, like people that enjoy bourbon and they go out and they hunt it like we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's come to a point now where I like the juice, but because of the stigma behind it, I'm so afraid to open up particular bottles that I have, because I know that the pour is worth its weight in gold. You know what I mean? So there's bottles that I think that I may never open because I know by the time my kids are of my age, he's going to get thousands for that bottle.
Yep.
Thousands. And I'm talking people that don't know, some of these bottles up here are really allocated. In 50 years from now, if you still have these bottles and you're storing them properly, we're talking possibly $100,000 bottles.
You could.
Secondary market.
Yeah.
Secondary market.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Even third.
And it's only a few. It's like
and out of the country.
It's like maybe the McKenna, the 12-year, and probably that'd be like in the Rabbit Hole, maybe, or the Willet, maybe the Willet.
The Willet, maybe.
Maybe. And we're not even getting into the heavy hitters like what Bobby has, like some Pappies that he has, or some other great B-Tag stuff. But coming across bottles nowadays, you're hard pressed to even find people even opening their bottles because they're afraid to lose value in it now. So it's not even a game of I want to taste and enjoy my spirit. Now it's like I'm going to hoard it and hold on to it because of what we've done to bourbon.
Which
can I get a pour real quick before I get into this? Because this part kills me.
You're right,
okay.
right.
Because
what did you want?
I'll go with that peach noodle.
Somebody's asking you, Bobby, which dessert Bourbon matches spicy cuisine or hot tea.
Repeat that.
Which dessert bourbon would you match spicy cuisine or hot tea with?
Oh, I don't like drinking whiskey with anything spicy.
Yeah, because it already has its own little heat.
It's got its own little heat, but
there
when you've
are-
got that spiciness on the palate already, I'll explain it like I would with a cigar. A cigar accents a whiskey well, even if it's a shitty cigar or shitty, they pair good together. If I just got done eating, let's just say even a mild wing, that mild wing is going to do nothing for any whiskey on this table. You're going to go to drink the whiskey, it's going to taste like hot chicken and wood. Like I don't like drinking whiskey with anything spicy.
How about a dessert?
A dessert?
Something sweet. Oh, this has got a nose on this one.
I don't even do it with anything sweet. Honestly, very rarely do I even drink whiskey with my food.
I don't either.
I kind of feel like I heard of like
I don't either.
a bourbon peach cobbler or a bourbon some,
Right, bourbon bacon,
And-
but that's also accompanied with something sweet. It's bourbon is not to me like wine. You can pair it with an entree, like you can pair it with food, right? Because bourbon has
No.
that hit to it where it will immediately distract you from your food.
If it helps answer the question, I like to drink bourbon before I have sushi.
Okay. That's strange, but okay.
Yeah.
Okay, man.
It just
You're
I,
priming your stomach, and you're.
I don't
yeah.
know what it is. To me, it's like if you were to eat ginger, it offers a zip on the tongue, but it also I guess in a way it primes the stomach, but it just tastes so good. And then after I finish a pour and go straight in on like a tuna or a sushi, it just tastes great.
Right.
And I don't know if that's just me in general or does everybody have something different as far as a food and bourbon?
Oh, I'm sure they do.
And
And-
absolutely, because everyone's palate's different.
right.
But I
And
would say the most food paired thing with whiskey is going to be chocolate. Pretty much any distillery you go down to in Kentucky, they offer you a chocolate and whiskey pairing, and they have a dark chocolate or milk chocolate or white
Right.
chocolate, and that all. They just got a guy that sits there and gets paid and says, "This is what we should pair with these guys," and then he just goes on and he drinks and he tries chocolates.
again,
and
a fabulous job.
fabulous,
Right.
job.
Fabulous job.
Right.
The editor says you can find Neat on, I think that's Tubu and on Amazon Prime Video. You can
Nice.
find Neat.
Okay.
Brennan says that that selection looks tasty. Our selection looks tasty.
What did
It's a
we
good one.
choose? So he chose Nulu Peach, and we are
I
drinking
love.
a toasted series of Circle City. Which-
Now, on the side, it states that it is distilled at an undisclosed location in Kentucky.
Okay.
I have my sources. I still know a lot of people in the industry, and I know that that came from Heaven Hill. I also happen to know that that is toasted Elijah Craig at 6.5 years old, barreled at, what does that say proof wise? 112, 114?
100.
100.
Yeah, that's why I think it's so
100.
good to me because I can't do over 112.
Mhm.
I can, but it gives me the burps, and I don't enjoy it. I have to ice it up.
I-
Now, how do you help people? This is going to be a great question.
Yeah. Wait, before you start, we have
Okay.
we have that question. It says, question one.
How do you know what I'm thinking?
Question one, because I'm your damn twin.
I know.
If you were new to bourbon
Yep.
and or whiskey, what do you start? It's blocking this thing, but what do you start to drink? Like, how do you start if you're new to it and you want to get into it?
I will always tell people, go and get yourself a bottle of Woodford and a bottle of Maker's Mark. That gives you your corn rye barley. That gives you your corn wheat barley.
Okay.
You get
Hold on.
both
I'm
sides.
going to stop you there.
Okay.
When you say Woodford or Maker's Mark, there are so many different labeling for those alone.
straight.
Yeah.
Just-
Okay.
Your-
So
your
tell them
OG
the exact
Woodford.
bottle, Bobby, because they could go out there and buy something that's way too hot. Like literally, like what proof should they dive into? Which maker's mark?
So just Woodford. I mean, Woodford Reserve Straight Bourbon Whiskey that comes in at shit. It's so weird. Like 92.3. It's a really stupid number. I still don't understand it to this day. But then Maker's Mark comes in at the 94.
Right.
And some people would say they'd rather try Basil Hayden, but Basil Hayden is like, it's really not bourbon to me.
Yeah, it's
there's
like the
nothing
wine
that-
of bourbon. Yeah,
Is that a
really
Jim
is.
Beam?
I
Is that a
agree.
Jim Beam product?
I don't think
No.
it is.
No. Is it
Yes.
is it a no? Is
No.
it the nose or
It's a Beam Suntory product.
okay.
It is Beam. It's
Okay.
just like Knob Creek. Beam also owns Maker's Mark, but there's a whole wide range of stuff that they own.
Mhm.
They do distill that, but Basil Hayden is. When I was at the liquor store, I used to call it the wife's whiskey
Mhm.
because there's always a husband that a wife doesn't like that he drinks whiskey. She doesn't like any whiskey. Oh, she tried Basil Hayden. She loved it. Basil Hayden came about because he loved his whiskey and he loved it hot. His wife wanted something that they could drink together. He crafted Basil Hayden. That is why every single Basil Hayden offering you have is 80 proof.
Okay.
At the absolute lowest, she
Okay.
didn't like the burn. She didn't like the alcohol. Basil Hayden is a good way to start, but it isn't a good way to leeway someone into how bourbon tastes because there's really nothing to Basil Hayden.
Right.
Whereas
okay,
Maker's
right.
Mark, you do get a little bit of that burn, but it's not an overly high proof, but it's still a weeder and you get that sweeter tint. Woodford Reserve, it's super easy. You still get that forward corn. You can get a little bit of that chocolatey barley that you get with most Woodford products.
Mhm.
And I think regular Maker's Mark and regular Woodford are the best ways to start and see what you want to get into.
Is there a certain way a newcomer should drink the product first? They have a maker's mark in front of them. You're there with them. Should they try to identify what they're tasting? Is there a way they should drink it? Should it be on the front palate first? Should they smell it first? Like, you see all these things that if you're serious about bourbon and you really want to get into it, what are some of the stepping stones?
There's a big chunk of that with bourbon that drives me crazy. There's your snobs that think you can't enjoy a bourbon unless they're like sideways, like people with white line, and they're looking at it in the light and I don't think that matters. Yes, it adds to it, but there's no reason a person who's having their second bourbon needs to sit there and be like
And smell it
"Dude, do
when
you
they
smell
don't.
this and
Yeah.
taste that?" And they're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah. They don't
"Jesus,
know.
man."
Yeah.
And I think it should just be front way. Yes, I think it should be smelled, and because part of the taste in some bourbons, you taste what you can smell. That is definitely not always the case.
Right.
But 1792 Bottle and Bond's a big one like that for me. It tastes like bananas.
Let me tell
But
you something, and I'm
it's
glad you said that.
Okay.
My first Old Forester, BIB.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they've got a banana.
Yes,
Oh,
they
yes,
do.
yes, they do.
I didn't believe a bourbon
on
could
the-
taste like bananas.
On the nose, it was instant caramel bomb, right? On the nose. You get past the ethanol, you let it just breathe a little bit. That first sip was like, is that a banana Foster? But
Yep.
I go back for the second one, and sure enough, it tastes just like bananas. And when I posed that to like Brian Mills or any one of my boys that love bourbon,
Yep.
everybody has that same note. So we can take a statistic off that and go, okay, 1792 is your banana note from Old Forester, and it's consistent. You know what I mean?
But I mean, that's the 1792 small batch at 80 or 92 or whatever it is, does not taste like banana to me.
Right.
The Bottle and Bond, banana all day.
All day.
Full proof,
Nothing.
not even close to banana.
Right.
There's something about that 100 proof area that it just brings out.
Okay,
the
so
banana.
we're talking about consistency with Old Forester.
Yep.
Okay, with the 1792 in particular. I don't know what Rick building it's at. I don't know the mash bill, but I do know that they have it dialed in to a point where
Mhm.
they're consistently getting the banana note. Now
Yep.
the mash build has to be different from the rest,
Yes.
right? So do you
Yes.
think they're using a lot more sweet? Like I don't know if it's not wheat in there, is it in the mash build?
Depends on which one you're using. Because I mean, there's the sweet wheat from 1792 where they are using wheat,
Right.
but everything else is a corn, rye, barley mash bill.
Okay, hold on. How do you take somebody new into bourbon and walk them up from the Woodford and the Maker's Mark? Like where are they going next?
That's the fun thing because that's up to them.
Mm. That's where your palate kicks in. Yeah.
I mean, there's people, and I know you drink how you want to drink. I sat next to a guy in Kentucky one day, and he ordered a lot B12 and Coke. I was about to shit myself, and I sat there with my GM. We're sitting there looking across. She grabs a bottle of Pappy 12. She pours it in the glass, and sure as shit, she squirted Coke in there. And I looked at the guy, and I
Oh
was
my
like,
God.
Time out. Okay, we got to explain this. Pappy Van Winkle. So he's saying that somebody probably in the secondary market, even in primary market, pretty much got $1,000 bourbon and then put Coke in there, which is like to some people it could be a sin.
Sacrilegious.
If you don't like yours neat, to others it could be user preference. But we're talking about a very very high end bottle of bourbon
with ice on top of that.
Oh my
ice on
God.
top of
Lot
that.
B, and Coke.
So didn't
And
even
he
taste
sat
the
right
bourbon at
beside
all.
me, and I watched her put it down in front of him, and he just nodded his head, and I'm like, "This is really happening."
Yeah.
And I was like, I stared at him for a second. I was like, "How does it feel to have that fuck you money?" He
Yeah.
looked me dead in the eye, and he goes,
And it finishes it.
"Pretty damn good." And I'm like, "Right on,
right
man.
on,
You
righteous.
enjoy that Pappy and
Yeah.
Coke.
Yeah.
You enjoy that $45 mixed drink you just had."
Right.
But they want to have it how they want to have it. But some people, their palate isn't going to be able to go past that Woodford and Makers. They're going to think that everything past that's going to be too hot, or not
Well,
necessarily that they expect things to taste like those first bourbons.
Mhm.
right.
But some people's palate, they're not going to be able to pull anything nice out of nicer bourbons.
And
that's okay.
and here's what I would call a bad steward.
Okay.
If you're educated like the three of us
Mhm.
and your friend wants to get into bourbon, right? We know how to take care of that friend. We're not going to ruin his or her experience by scorching out their palate with a hazmat bottle,
Right.
right? You don't do that to anyone.
But I would also not start them with a bottle of Pappy or a bottle of Blanton's.
Correct.
Because
Correct.
You don't want them to hold to that standard.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. And maybe he's right. You start them off slow. You know, maybe a Garrison Honeydew, you know, or maybe a Russell 10-year.
Right.
You know,
Russell 10-year is fantastic.
yeah,
Honestly, fantastic.
something with flavor, right?
Yep,
And because you
yep.
want them to actually get into bourbon. You can easily ruin someone's bourbon experience and kill them from the game of bourbon
Yep.
by just throwing them a hazmat bottle because you think that a stag is a great bourbon, right? We know better than that.
Right.
Yep.
So be cautious too when you try bourbon. Always start with the lower proof.
Yeah. So I mean, and then there's also this. There's barrel strength. There's cash strength. There's different finishes. So walk me through why did companies need to do this? Is this a marketing scheme or is there
definitely a
something to
marketing
it? Okay.
scheme. Everybody, it does. I don't care what it is. If it's shoes, if it's cars, there's always got to be something changed. This is the better Honda Civic. 2 years later, this is a better Honda Civic. Oh, we put a wing on the back, and now it's a better Honda Civic. Now it's an R type. And it's the same with bourbon. Everyone will use Maker's Mark again. Everyone loved straight Maker's Mark. It's a fantastic bottle. It's good. And they made 46. They made all these different staves that they could make it sweeter. They could make it have more of a oak forward flavor, but not straight wood. And they could have it just be toasted. They could have all these different things. And then once that law came out that they could have cast strength, I mean, below that 130, but you can have over that 130. cask strength became huge because people were able to get these very, very high proof whiskeys, which
Mhm.
people who drank to get drunk loved that. People who drank to enjoy whiskey, yeah, they were nice, but they could pour small amounts, still get as much flavor out of it as they wanted.
Right.
Then they got small batches. And
Hold on. If you guys hear a weird noise in the background, we're right in the middle of a thunderstorm.
are we really?
And
Yeah.
I was wondering what that was.
Yeah.
the rain,
And we got a tin roof.
the rain is pelting the roof. So bear with us on that background noise.
And before you finish that, Bobby, what's your aesthetically most favorite bottle design?
I'll tell you mine.
Favorite? You say yours first. Let me think.
Mine
on
is
that.
mine is the dragon milk.
Yours
That
is the
is-
dragon milk.
That's an awesome.
Okay, I have
bottle.
two. I have the Prohibition bottle from Old Forester
Mhm.
and the Smoke Wagon. Smoke
Okay.
Wagon is my favorite bourbon. Anyone who hasn't had a Smoke Wagon unfiltered, uncut, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Uh-huh.
And I wish I had a dragon's milk bottle, but it's pretty much a dragon's scales covered on the bottle, and it
They're
feels
so badass.
and it feels so nice to the hand.
That was one of the first bottles that I drank consistently for a while. Like when it came out, they told us at Gaze that Indiana was going to get 80 cases, and that was it.
Yeah.
I bought 2 cases, bought 12 bottles. That
So,
is,
so that's where they all went.
yeah, until
Yeah.
they ended up giving us more, and I'm like,
And
you
there
guys
you
told
go.
me I'd only get 8 cases.
Yeah.
I just bought 12 bottles, and now you're telling me we're going to get it whenever we want.
Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
But that is a cool bottle. One of my favorite bottles is, it's not aesthetically pleasing. It's very unaesthetic. But Sazerac, they have a half-gallon bottle.
Yes.
Sa-
Yes.
Yeah.
That half-gallon
Sazerac is a
bottle-
great bottle.
Outside, there's a bourbon community within the bourbon community, and there's, I don't even know what the group's called. There's literally tens of thousands of people in it, and it's just basically like a blog for people that enjoy it. And they voted why this was a category. Sazerac is the most phallic bottle that is on the market. If you take that cork out, it is a very phallic, small, skinny, fat head, skinny. It looked, well, the half gallon sits like this with just that little piece, and it's just cracked me
Yeah,
up for years,
right,
yeah,
man.
yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
2 excessive bottles are that and the Eagle Rare half gallon.
Right,
There's no
yes.
reason for that Eagle Rare to be this. It's
Right,
it's
Right.
crazy.
A lot of people.
I will say the Willet pot
Yes.
is one of the
That's
bottles.
what
Why
I
are
was
you
gonna
always
say.
tapping into
Well,
my
because
mind?
I
That's
told
what
you,
I was
sir.
gonna
Stay
we're-
out of
say.
my
we're twins.
mind.
The Willet pot bottle, if you can imagine, it's a round cylindrical bottle like this, and it has a nice little spout, and it looks like something like out of a chemist lab, like some sort of Bunsen.
Looks like something out of a college kid's dorm room that he's
Right.
hiding from the
Right.
RA.
Right,
Right.
right, some sort of bong or
It's
something.
Some sort of beaker.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
The amount of trying
Bunsen
kids that
and
came
yeah.
in and would spend $60 on a bottle of Willet
Yeah.
right.
just for that. I'm like, okay, here you go.
Yeah,
I would,
well,
end up, I would end up
God.
pouring that juice out because it's
not.
god awful.
Yeah,
It's
it's god awful,
horrible,
and,
man.
and I think the only reason why people buy a Willet bottle is exactly that, for
Mhm.
the bottle.
That would probably be one of the most aesthetically cool looking bottles. Other than that, Whistle Pig. Which one did I get? Whistle Pig 18.
What's up, Simply Risky?
That came in a cool box. It had the crystal topper that came with it.
Mhm. Now, what if you're trying to get a I don't want to generalize all women, but in my experience, my wife doesn't like bourbon, but there is one she really loved, and that was just, I guess, her palate. But how do you walk a woman in on bourbon?
You know,
Wait, hold on. My wife loves the smell of bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
She can tolerate the taste, but she has the nose for it. She thinks all of them smell delicious. So yeah, I'm curious to know so I can get her some.
I will die on this hill that most women will try it. And then they're done.
Yeah.
My biggest thing with bourbon or even most beers, your first sip, you are not going to get anything out of that anyone would expect. I always say your mouth is really just adjusting to what you just drank that first sip.
Yeah, the first is the
Cool
horrible.
it down.
Yep.
Take a second sip. That second sip is where you really start to get flavor. You
Mhm.
notice that it really doesn't have that much of a burn.
Mhm.
You're used to drinking tea, Sprite, and water. You go to 100 proof of alcohol.
It's gonna
Your mouth is
it's gonna
gonna
slap. Yeah.
It's like eating something sour and it hits your jaws and you just same thing. I had seen most wives, women at gays hit that first taste, hate it, and then walk away.
Mhm.
Right.
And so many times I would try to get them to come back up to the bar and say, you've got to try that. Just one more sip, your mouth acclimated to it. This is where you're going to really get the flavor. You're not going to get the burn that you just got.
Right.
And a lot of times, once I started telling them that, they started to learn to enjoy it because they came in with their husbands to talk to me, and then they started trying them with them. Once they hit that second taste, they're able to pull those flavors. It doesn't
Right.
burn as much, and they're like, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was.
Has someone explained to them that that's a pure ethanol hit that they're getting on that first run? Like,
Yep. That's how I get them to try it again. I
Yeah.
mean, the last thing you want to do is have something burn and then you want to try it again. I mean, you shit your pants and you got shit down your pants, you don't want to do that again. But
Right,
if you
right.
convince somebody that if you shit down your pants a second time, you'll get $1,000,
Yeah.
oh,
they'll shit their pants.
they'll be shitting all
Yeah,
day.
yeah, yeah.
Sir, I will shit my pants because I could easily just wash them or
Couple
hell,
of-
throw them away and get a new pair of pants.
Couple of dew wipes later.
Exactly.
You're good to go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm in that same thing with bourbon. A lot of them, they make that face. Sometimes it'll make them cough. That first sip just tears them up.
Mhm.
But if you can get them to have that second taste, like I said, I'll die on that hill that second taste, they might not hate it as much as they did when they first tried
Sarah
it.
Monroe Mad Donna says, I like burning alcohol. And this is like a very strong-minded woman. So
Mhm.
she's proving us wrong.
Fair enough.
Sarah Mad Donna isn't your typical person at the same
Yeah.
time.
She's like a
She is otherworldly.
yeah.
I don't even think you from this planet. Prove it.
Yeah.
I haven't even seen your face.
Yeah.
Somehow I think she really talks like this. Beep, boop, 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 beep, boop, boop. Yeah, go ahead.
I might
She
my
says,
girlfriend the same way.
she says, I'm Scottish. Yeah, she's Scottish. Well, hell.
What are you going to teach a Scottish woman about bourbon? Tell me that. What do you give Sarah Monroe, who has a hot palate? How do you give a woman a hot palate drink? Like, what's your go-to?
I'm going to say something like
Tumbling
Stag
dice.
or that old what do we got there? That
The
Old
old
Souls?
souls.
the old souls.
Yes.
Tumbling dice stuff, man.
Oh,
Tumbling
tumbling
dice.
dice.
Any tumbling dice store pick, it's the perfect mix of heat and flavor in it,
Mhm.
and you can't go wrong. And they're anywhere from 5 up to, I think the oldest one I've seen is 8 years old.
Mhm.
But for $50, they're fantastic.
Okay, here's a big question right here.
Okay.
And this goes on
Wait, hold on.
master distillers.
Wait, hold on. Sarah says, short, y'all. Let me see here. Y'all know how I talk exactly like I write. So
Yes. Okay. Master distillers.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say the master distiller got into the game at the age of 25. I'm going to give it the age of 25 because
Mhm.
it takes some knowledge if you're not a direct descendant from a master distiller.
Mhm.
What's the likelihood of a master distiller seeing 3 or 4 of their products hit the line before they pass away?
What's the question there?
What's the life expectancy of a master distiller
I mean,
upon the products that he can put out with his recipe? How many of them you think he would see?
hopefully all of them. But
What's the likelihood though? That's not a I think that's a bullshit
tough.
answer. That's tough.
That's
like,
tough, though. I mean, like, you look at Jimmy Russell, he's 80. I mean, he doesn't move around very good, and he hasn't for the last 8-10 years, but dude still gets up. He goes, he greets all his customers. He goes, he walks through the rick house. He does tastings. He still does his job, but he's been doing it for longer than any of us have been alive.
Right. But
And I
so
mean, he's been able to see all those things, but
but how many things has he seen? Like, are there still some things Russell put in
guaranteed,
that he will never see?
guaranteed.
yeah.
And he's one of the lucky ones.
He's one of the lucky ones for sure.
Because if there are certain master distillers that are hell bent on, I'm making 10 years
Mhm.
or I'm making 15-year bourbons and I'm not making any less, they're not going
Now-
to see more than 3 of their recipes actually come through, even if they didn't make
Now,
it.
A lot of them don't go in with the mindset of this barrel is going to sit here for 10 years.
Okay.
They'll run, let's say, an entire rick house of 13,000 barrels of, say, Buffalo Trace. It's got to be aged 6 years to be a Buffalo Trace. Okay, what happens if we leave 2,000? We only have 11,000 barrels of Buffalo Trace. These 2,000 get to sit for 3 more years. And then they hit 10 years old. Okay, these were delicious. People loved them. Let's take 500 out of these 2,000 we had. Let's bring it up to 15 years. And that gives them a marketing and kind of a, I don't want to say a money grab, but you take something from 6 years up to 10 years, they can bring a $30 bottle up to a $75 bottle. 5 more years, they can make it a $200 bottle. Yes, there are distillers that specifically want, yes, these are going to age for 10 years. Like I said, Weller Green Label, that's a 6-year-old weeder. Age it for 4 more years. Slap a Pappy label on it for a 10-year Pappy, sell it for $60.
Jeez.
Let it age for 2 more years, it's a lot B12. 3 more years, Pappy 15. And
12 more years, Weller 12. Yeah, Weller 12.
yeah. I mean, yes, there are distillers that specifically dedicate, but that's more now. I think back when it was more of a, we want to do this many barrels of this, say 6 year. And then they're like, okay, we've got enough that we can provide our distributors and our distillery. We will have this many left over after we get done with that.
Right.
And then they're like, okay, well, let's age this 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 more years. And then they get those older products. So no, I would say majority, no, they're not going to see everything that they distill. If, say, Jimmy today made a mash bill of ABC and he wants it to be 6 years old, I'm not saying Jimmy Russell's going to die in the next 6 years, but he's older. There's a chance that he might not get to see that.
Right.
But he's a master distiller. Every 6 months to hell, every month if he wanted to, he can walk right up and he can taste that barrel.
Okay.
Year 2, he can walk up. Year 3, and they do. They taste them to make sure that they're starting to taste how they want them to taste. If at any point they're not, they'll pull it, they'll blend it with something else, and poof, they've got a golden standard bottle, and you don't even know that he threw something new in there.
Right.
It's
They're asking how many years have you been specializing in this trend?
Before it was a trend. So every bit of 8-10 years plus.
18
I've
years.
been an executive steward since 18, I think 17, 2017. I'm trying to remember when we opened the new store. I think 2017 I went down. But I was in the bourbon when you could pick up Blanton's on a shelf. And like I told you earlier, when I was starting, there was lot B12s with
Mhm.
dust for $50.
which is amazing.
And it's insane.
Simply Risky is asking, what's a good bourbon to start with coming from a hardcore whiskey like Uncle Nearest?
See, Uncle Nearest is a good recipe.
I was gonna say it's not super hardcore. That's honestly like that could be a daily for a lot of people. It's not overly bearing. It's not overly hot.
Mhm.
It's
I actually like Uncle Nearest. It's a
It's
very
great.
smooth
it is
whiskey.
It really, really is. I mean, that's a great start just in that. I mean, you can go up or down from the Nearest. I
Right.
mean, I'd say what would I compare that to? I'd say jump up from that and go to a Four Roses.
Oh, there you
I would try the small batch. If you want to go crazy with it, spend the
Yes.
$60, get the Black Label
Yeah.
small batch
My
select.
wife got in on Four Roses Select. That's what
Mhm.
made her a bourbon
Yep.
drinker or a lover of bourbon.
Mm-hmm.
She won't drink too many, but Four Roses captivated her palate. And then that's what kind of got her in.
It's my favorite.
But with that being said, that Risky's question raises another question.
Mm-hmm.
And this goes to the new consumers in bourbon who know absolutely nothing about bourbon. The prices on bourbon have gotten ridiculous.
Crazy.
Does price dictate the bourbon?
Not at all. I mean, go back to that McKenna 10-year single barrel 6-8 years ago. You, like I said, you literally had to pick that up off the bottom shelf, the very bottom shelf for $24.99.
This one.
And now, if you're lucky enough to find it, you're gonna spend 60 plus for it. And it's a good bottle,
Mhm.
and it's a good bottle for $60.
It is.
But it was a hell of a good bottle for 25
Right.
Yeah, it was.
off
Right.
the bottom
Yeah,
shelf.
yeah.
So how are people going to distinguish what juice is good? Right now, everything is pretty high. Even the
It
crappy
is.
stuff is high.
It is.
So how are people to navigate through this world? And is there a bourbon crash coming? That's the second question, because there's something coming down the line where there's actually a bourbon crash coming,
Well-
and you named two other spirits that are going to take its place.
Well, before you answer that, let me get some more questions out. Revolt 1680 asks, what's a good bourbon to put hair on his chest?
Ooh, man. Anything over 100
Damn, JoJo.
anything over 100 proof is going to be put hair on your chest, unless you're a 500-pound man. But it'll probably still put hair on your chest over anything over 100 proof. I mean, and some people say it puts hair on your chest. That feeling, I call the Kentucky hug.
Kentucky Hug, the warm
Kentucky
feeling.
hug.
Yep.
You swallow, you feel that burn all the way down. A couple minutes later, you burp and you get to taste it that second time, and you're like, that's what some people would associate with putting hair on your chest.
Right.
I associate it with, damn, that is good.
Yeah.
That
so
is
warm.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything over 100 proof. I
Yep.
just say, look at the bottle, find anything over 100 proof, give it a try.
Yeah.
And high
Me-
proof equals hair.
Me, and that's where I'm at. Me,
Mhm.
I am a BIB guy. My
Yep.
my palate says 100. Like my max is 112, but I am a fan of actually tasting my bourbon without burping it up. You know?
What to put hair on your chest, JoJo,
Yeah.
is a smoke wagon.
True.
Yeah. See, now you want to kill somebody. And I don't know what the proof of a smoke wagon is.
I think it's 127 or
I think
either-
they vary on that.
either 121 or 120,
57.44. So what is that?
114.8.
114.8.
114.8. That's not bad.
That's really not.
Okay, so how are people to decide when the bourbon prices have gotten crazy? And then don't let me forget the second question is, we talked about a bourbon crash, okay? And there's some different spirits out there that are going to put bourbon kind of under the water a little bit. So let's go over the price and how to pick a good bourbon with the price and the crash.
Let me grab one more for it real quick. What do we got?
What you got? What you
did
want?
you guys want me to try?
The Warehouse.
Would you prefer I try the warehouse or the old soul?
The Old
What
Soul.
would
The Old
you would say
Soul.
try
The
the
Old
old soul.
Soul.
Yeah,
I'll do
try
the
the
old
Old
soul.
Soul.
Because there's an old black
And-
dude on it, and he's a jazz player, and you can't go wrong with an old black jazz player.
Yeah. And what was the one I had, Bobby, that you brought? The
Here,
circle.
I have a towel for
That
you.
Circle City.
That Circle City. I'm gonna tell you right now,
It's
it
very good.
it is an easy sipper and it is a fine bourbon.
It really is.
It tastes amazing. It tastes amazing.
So Old Soul.
And it's an MGP.
It is MGP. Okay.
What's the proof on the Old Soul?
It is the Old Soul runs in at 7-year. Oh my God. 31 hit me like I'm 65. 122.3.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
that's
getting up
a-
there.
But it doesn't. Okay, here's the other thing people don't know. Just because it says it's hot doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be hot.
That's true, because I come across some borderline hazmat bottles, and that's the thing. So when you get a really hot bottle, that's the common phrase is to call it hazmat because it's super hot and you need
Mhm.
some ice to water it down. So whenever you hear us say that, that means the bottle is super, super high in proof.
And I love it.
Add on to that I think.
I love this with a cigar, by the way.
Do you?
Yes.
I think it's not an official, like actual bourbon law,
Mhm.
but I believe to be hazmat has to be 140 or higher.
What is it? 140 or higher?
I think it's
Okay.
140 or higher.
I've tasted some 130s that taste like 160, Bobby. And I'll tell you what, I would get into a hazmat suit and be like, "You are not feeding me this."
Yup.
And again, real quick, Revolt asked to the opposite. What's the smoothest bourbon you guys would recommend?
The smoothest.
I mean, what do we have here right now on the table?
Honestly, your smoothest tasting, I would go with anything weeded, really, because
Well,
you're gonna have.
I know
wheat.
what he's going to say.
For them not knowing, we have to kind of speak in like the people that are just starting out. So you may have to give out like a name of a particular bottle.
Easiest for someone just starting, like I said, Basil Hayden. If you want to drink something and almost guarantee 100% that that person's not gonna cringe at it
Mhm.
or hate the heat, Basil Hayden's the best way to
I
start.
have a toasted Basil Hayden.
The
and
toasted basil was awesome.
re-
Also, their
Yes.
subtle smoke or hint of smoke, whichever one that
Mhm.
was. That with a cigar.
Basil Hayden.
Basil Hayden, there you go.
Basil Hayden's a great way to
Yeah.
start.
Can I get a
Man.
pour of that rabbit?
And that anyone that knows me knows that that is easily one of my top fives.
The rabbit?
The rabbit hole. And that's a 4-grain distilled. It's 70% corn, 10% malted barley, 10% honey malted barley, 10% malted wheat. And there's not a bunch of things that are 4-grain distilled.
Well,
Yes.
you don't know
typically-
this bottle at all, do you, Bobby?
No.
The sweetest bourbon I've ever had. The sweetest bourbon that literally tastes like candy to me
Let me get a
Sherry.
water.
is the Rare Breed.
A
Oh, the
water,
rare
a water.
breed?
Oh yeah, this stuff right here, but it is super hot. Oh, you pushed. Oh no! It slid it to the mouse.
No, we're still going. We're still going. We just
Just got a nice
Technical.
little beat.
Yeah, we
technical
just gotta-
difficulties, people.
We'll be right back. This guy.
I can see us on that other one.
Yeah, I know. But
Yeah.
we have to just stop this one.
Just stop that.
Oh, the joys of being live, and your brother likes to throw things.
I didn't
over.
I didn't think I slid it that hard, Bobby. I swear to you, I don't know my own strength.
I seen it. It wasn't even that. It wasn't even that
Right.
bad. If anything, he pushed the mouse into it.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Right? Isn't that good?
Old Soul from Cathead.
Can't have it. It's mine. It's my old Negro, and he stays with me.
That's out of Mississippi.
Yes, it is.
I don't know. Are we back? What does that look like? No, it's like got us at a small portion of it, doesn't
You can see me.
it? Sarah Monroe likes to know if we like sweet bourbons.
I do not.
Heck, I
I
love
do.
sweet bourbons.
I do.
Very few. Like the rabbit hole is about the sweetest I like to get. But you give me 4 or 5 squares off a Hershey's chocolate bar, there's a good chance I'm gonna throw up.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't physically do sweets, let alone alcohol and sweets. Hey,
I think that put us right back. I don't know if that worked or not. Let's let that load up and see what it does. All of that for just throwing me sliding me a
Right?
bottle of water. What
You
do you
know-
think about that?
You know what did that? Was this damn old Negro, Bobby.
the old jazz man.
I start drinking this Negro blood and I don't know what happens to me. I just turn into someone else. I don't know why.
Oh,
It's a damn thing, Bobby.
That's life. It's life.
That's life.
That's life.
That's why I like live things. I like when shit goes awry.
It happens.
Are we back up? Are we rolling here?
I'm working on it. No.
Oh God.
Will it is. Now you're just gonna put it right in his face. There you go.
I'm so confused.
Oh,
That's what happens when you
Okay,
come to
yeah,
this show,
yeah.
Bobby.
the wonders of live, but thankfully we don't know how to conduct ourselves when we're live.
No, we don't.
That's
So
perfectly fine. I do the same when
And
I
this
do
is
mine.
this is so new to us, so it's just
it all started when you
it's gonna
started
be R&D.
it all started when you started badgering that old Negro soul bourbon over there. That's just not good when you do things like that.
Anytime you drink Negro juice, it turns you into a Negro, Bubby.
Oh my God.
When you go home tomorrow, they may not recognize you.
Yep.
Okay.
Don't even
Yeah,
don't even entertain that
Don't
shit.
entertain what I'm saying because
I was
it's
gonna say I
just might get you canceled amongst your friends. Okay, we were on the price of bourbon, how to buy through the price.
The biggest issue is everything gets a price based off of gets a secondary price based off of could be one person. If one bottle, I hate using Pappy and Buffalo stuff for this, but let's just use the Lot B 12 year. It's like a $90 bottle retail. It'll only be $120 secondary if that's what it's going for. But as soon as it sells one time on a secondary market for $500,
Mm-hmm.
that $120 secondary price just hit $500. Someone was willing to pay $500, that's your new low. Somebody spends $750 on it 2 weeks later, that's the new. And it's unfortunate because there's always some rich asshole that's like, here's my Lot B12 and Coke. I'll buy that for $800. And
Right.
they're like, dude, it's an $80 bottle. Why'd you do that? And then you
Yeah.
go to look for it and it's like, oh, now I got to spend $800 because
Somebody did that.
Wh-
exactly.
Which is different because people in like overseas in Europe, right?
Mm-hmm.
For this McKenna or the Weller 12 year, they're literally paying thousands of dollars
Some.
for these bottles.
Some. I mean, like you can go to Japan and you can get a Blanton's Black for like $52 American.
Really?
America is so, I don't want to say jaded, but we have MSRP pricing. We don't use MSRP pricing. It's usually going to be more than what the distillery recommends retail price is.
Right.
And that's how it is, unfortunately.
That's
Overseas,
capitalism.
They love MSRP.
Yeah.
And Americans love to go over there and think that they can buy everything under the sun and throw it on the plane. I mean,
Mhm.
they can bring a couple of bottles on their check-on.
Mm-hmm.
I ain't going to trust some guy to huck my suitcase from 8 feet above down to a guy that's smaller than my suitcase with
Right.
8 bottles in there.
Yeah.
Now, there are some places that they are there to make money. They're going to sell that Blanton's Black for $250 just because they know they can. But I think a part of the Japanese market out there comes to tradition and heritage for them.
Right.
They don't want to be known as somebody that's taking advantage of other people, whether it be Americans, Japanese, anyone visiting out there. And I think that has a big thing to do with it because if you go to stores in Scotland, they're pretty damn overpriced on a lot of things.
Mhm.
Doesn't matter how many bottles they've got at the distillery 2 blocks down the road. I mean, hell, same with Kentucky. I mean, Kentucky's the worst place to hunt for bourbon in the United
So
States.
you're literally telling people just if you see it, you like it, buy it.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you enjoy it, drink it.
Personally, though, don't feed into the secondary market. I have very rarely in my life put money into secondary market for
yeah.
stuff. I'll go to a bar and spend $35 on a pour of Lot B12 before I go out and spend
Right.
$800 just to try it and be like, it's another weeded bourbon at 98 proof.
Right.
There goes 800 of my dollars.
So that's
Right.
probably a good thing for people to do is go to a bar that houses a bunch of different bourbons
Yup.
and try them there before you commit to the bottle.
And if you're anywhere local around here in like Angola, Auburn, Fort Wayne area, the 6 on James, she's got like 1,800 different whiskeys and bourbons.
Mhm.
You name me a bourbon right now, I can guarantee you she's got it for a reasonable price. She does Blanton's pours for like $7.
Oh, and that's
Like,
nice. That's someone who actually wants people to actually taste these bourbons that are
exactly,
hard to get.
exactly, and
Mhm.
that's what I would tell people. Go
Right.
to a bar before you go out and spend $800 on a bottle that you don't know if you're gonna like.
Yeah,
Mhm.
go try it.
Or
And if you're
even
gonna,
$75 on a
yeah,
bottle.
absolutely, absolutely.
I'll tell
Yeah.
you, this rabbit right now tastes just like cough syrup, like cherry cough syrup, like Vicks cough syrup.
Really?
I don't know why I'm getting that, but that's exactly what I got from it.
Huh.
Medicinal.
It's all medicinal.
Okay. Is there going to be a bourbon crash?
I believe there's going to be a bourbon crash. And again, I think a big mark of the secondary hit took with store picks and whatnot. And the variances of, like I said, Knob Creek's their mainstay for $50. It's a 9-year. We used to be able to get their single barrel picks all the way up to 10, 12, 14, 16 years old and still pay that $50 price tag. Well, then Knob Creek came out with, let's say, their 12-year for like $80. And they're like, did that really justify the 3 or 4 years to jump it up $40? Then people are like, well, this is a single barrel at that same. Try to throw it online. Say $500. Nobody bites. $400. Nobody bites. $300. Nobody bites. $250. Someone buys it. Next thing you know, that is the new meta for secondary. People are more than willing to spend $250
Mm-hmm.
on this bottle. Any store pick that hits 12 years from there, people are going to reference back to that and be like, this went for $250 3 weeks ago. I think I can get at least $200, $300 out of it.
Revolt wants to know what's the most you guys would spend on a bottle.
I've spent $1,400 on a bottle.
Now, was that through an auction or what?
That was just at a liquor store.
Oh, really?
It was a rabbit hole bottle. They've done a lot of I don't want to say experimental series, but they do different barrel finishes. And it was an Umashu plum wine barrel finish.
Now, because you spent $1,400 on that bottle, do you think you could still get the unopened? Would you still think you could get the 14 out of it?
No.
I
mean, there's bottles. I'll use Woodford Baccarat for it's a $3,000, $2,500 retail. It is regular Woodford Reserve, finished in a cognac barrel for 60 days. Put into real French Baccarat crystal. That's what the bottle's made out of. That bottle itself, empty, is worth $2,000 plus, while you're drinking a $40 Woodford at best.
Oh my God.
But most of those that is geared towards a collector. That is not geared towards drinkers like us.
But what about the one drop?
The Last Drop series is tough because there's a bunch of different ones and they did a lot of different blends.
Like Boss Hogs.
Boss Hogs, I'm a little slut for Boss Hogs.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
wait,
hold on, because this goes back to how much did you ever
'Cause
spend
we're
on
jumping
a
a
bottle?
little bit here.
Yeah.
Okay, I've spent $500. Is the most I spent on any bottle of juice.
Oh shit!
I spent $500 on a Whistle Pig 18 and drank it all that same night
Okay,
with one person.
I spent $500 on a 18-year Samurai
from
Whistle Pig.
From Whistle Pig.
Yes,
Yep.
and I haven't even opened it.
You're gonna hate
And apparently, it is one of the best years ever to cook out of Canada.
You're gonna hate me. Okay, I've spent $80, $69 on a 12-year which is worth more than $69.
Whistle Pig 12?
No, a Weller 12.
Oh, I was about to shit my pants. I was like, where'd you go for $60? You
Yeah,
got that? Get out of here.
yeah. So it's not about what I spent, but it's about what the bottle is worth.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys look up Whistle Pig. You can look up the Samurai, and you can look up the which one did you buy?
I picked up the 18-year double malt rye.
Okay.
And that was $500.
And what you want to look at too, that is a very beautiful thing. What they did with these bottles are the toppers.
Mm-hmm.
Just look at the toppers. It is a beautiful thing.
And that comes into like the collecting thing. Like I said, I bought that. It was $449 plus tax.
Mm-hmm.
That's MSRP. I'll try it. Me and a buddy sat. We drank it in a night, smoking cigars. Woke up and it was completely empty. That bottle did not last me 24 hours.
Yeah.
Bought a second bottle not 6 months later, 8 months later when the second batch came out. It lasted me about 3 days between two euchre tables playing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're willing to spend the money, why not drink it?
Right.
Otherwise, it's going to sit on the shelf and it's going to be no different from you having $500 in cash sitting right in your pocket.
And that goes to my point. And that goes to my point, Bobby. Like, why that Weller 12-year, why this Henry McKenna, why people are so afraid to open their bottle is they're so heavily allocated. You finish that bottle, the chances of you finding another one of those bottles, good luck.
But just about anything that's out there, you could name off to me and I could point you in the direction of something that's just as comparable and readily available.
Right. But I think now because of the nostalgia and the stigma behind the bourbon world, people actually want to know and have in their possession a Weller 12.
Yep.
And you know, what's the show with Kevin Costner that he just finished? Like he's not Yellowstone.
Oh, haven't watched it.
Okay. Nor have I.
I have no idea.
Nor have I.
I do know that he drank a Weller 12 in the back of a car in an episode.
And this is my point. When you glamorize it and you polarize it and you put Hollywood behind these bourbons, for the person that actually wants to taste a Weller 12-year, they'll never have that opportunity because this is what we do to the spirit.
Like
right?
Blanton's was hard to get in like 2014. I don't know when John Wick 2 came out.
Right.
But Keanu's sitting back there after he just got shot and everything else, and he takes a hefty pour of Blanton's before he gets stitched up. Holy shit, the amount of people coming into the liquor store saying, what's that whiskey that Keanu Reeves was drinking? I'm like,
and it's the bottle.
Yeah. It's the bottle.
Yeah.
And
But a fun fact about Blanton's, I don't know if you guys have ever known this. Have you watched the Austin Powers series?
Yeah.
Gold member.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene where a bunch of guards are coming out and they're trying to fight Austin and Foxy, and they are whooping their ass. If you look in the back, there's a table and there's a tripod up on that table, and on that tripod sits a bottle of Blanton's.
Jeez.
And I literally just noticed that last year. It was one of those things. I haven't watched Austin Powers in forever.
Yeah.
I haven't got a good stupid laugh in a while, and I was like, holy shit, there's a
Yeah.
bottle of Blanton's on
right there.
Austin Powers.
Yeah.
They make their cameos.
So-
like if you're looking, they have the debuts.
So I have a bottle of Yellowstone, very rare, unlimited, I believe it is.
Is it the 101?
The 101.
The square bottle?
The
Which
square
one?
bottle. Yes.
Which one?
I do
Because they
not
did a
kn-
few different
you
barrels.
have to go in the house and look
Mhm.
at it. Because of Yellowstone, the show,
Yep.
you can't find them anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they were already a diamond in the rough, like the needle in
Right.
the haystack, finding these bottles.
Right.
Now you would not be able to look at or find any
Another
of these
Jim
bottles.
Beam thing, by the way.
Is it really?
Yep. They're owned by Beam Suntory, but it's all produced at the Limestone Branch Distillery.
Right.
Okay. So what does that say about this New York brand, Widow Jane? They claim that there is a limestone river that runs through New York. Is this true, or?
I don't know that for sure. I don't see why there couldn't be. I don't know where the best limestone rich areas are.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, we've got limestone rich areas across Indiana, but we don't have it like Kentucky's got, which is pretty much if there's water there
Mhm.
and it's moving,
It's
it's
limestone.
probably limestone rich.
Okay.
And it's when I say we've got limestone areas around here of water, we have limestone water. It's not
Mm.
it's not rich in that to the point where they're like, this is going to be the best whiskey.
Right.
And again, like I said earlier, that's a big part of I think what makes Kentucky bourbon. That
Yeah.
limestone rich water is something
It
that
is, and
Mhm.
and that's why it's only in the Midwest.
Yep.
That's why it's
Yep.
hard to find. You can't unless you do it. So we know it's a
But it's like you can't you think you're gonna be able to grow corn out in Las Vegas and make some
right,
smoke wagon.
right,
It's like
right. You're not gonna. You don't have the climate.
and that's why back when they looked at the agriculture of the United States and was like, this right here is the prime area for corn. It's never too hot through the summer to where the crop burns. It's never too cold to where it can't grow. We will have corn all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that circles me back to yes, Kentucky's great, but more than 80% of the corn that goes into Kentucky bourbon comes from us here in Indiana.
Right.
Closer to us to those cornfields than Kentucky is to the cornfields. Like it's wild.
Real quick before we wrap this up, there's one thing that I really have to know, and I know you have the answers for this because
Oh man.
when bourbon was at its height back in just out of the prohibition
Mhm.
and during the roaring 20s
Mhm.
and the 30s, bourbon lost its leg, and it lost its leg to clear spirits.
Mhm.
Why, oh why did it lose its legs, and how did it ever bounce back?
It was cheap. It was cheap to be able to make anything clear. You could make it with corn, you could make it with rice, you could make it with any kind of grain that you could crush down and let sit there and drip into alcohol. They did it and it was cheap. I mean, even just wheat. I mean, wheat-based vodkas, while there isn't many, would probably be the smartest route to go if we didn't have corn.
Mm.
Because there's an abundance of one thing. Why not take that and make it? All they have to do is pump it straight from the still right into a bottle. Where we take bourbon, it's at least got to be in a barrel for 2 years. So they got to pay for storage, they got to pay for barrels. The guy down at Newtown at Old 55, he spends over $1 million a year just in barrels.
Which we have a bottle of that.
Yep,
Mhm.
they don't make their own barrels. They get them from a cooperage. One of the most famous ones is a Kelvin cooperage,
Mhm.
and it's not cheap to get one single barrel for 250 bottles. He
Right.
spends over $1 million. Mind you, he does 35-gallon barrels. Jason doesn't do standard 53s.
Right.
you
Because
get
the
about-
smaller the barrel, the faster the cook time, right? The faster you can get your product in return.
Yes and no.
Oh shit.
So some people will call it time capsule aging.
hmm Which
There's
is what
less
the
barrel.
wood hat guy does.
There's less barrel, which means there's more surface area of whiskey to wood,
Mhm.
which makes a 4-year taste like a 6-year,
Yes.
which isn't. It's true to a point.
Mhm.
It's true to a point. That's about as far as that goes.
Okay,
Because it
well-
does give it that extra flavor, but it's not a 6-year.
But okay, so
That's a gray area that I.
Okay.
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 Mm.
We'll
But
come
the-
back and visit that.
but the clear spirits had its run. We know this. It had a long run.
And it's still
It's still
pretty
running.
decent. Yeah.
I feel like bourbon came back. I want to say 5-6 years ago we started seeing bourbon, maybe even shorter.
I'd say
The return of bourbon. Why did it take so long? And why is it coming back now?
Well, you got to realize that there's a lot of things that weren't ready even 8-10 years ago.
But Bobby, we're talking 50 years.
yeah,
50 years bourbon
But
has come
again,
back.
what after Prohibition, again, they started over. It's not like, again, they just had all of these barrels just
Right.
hanging out and they're like, don't touch that. No, they were walking in and they were pouring these down sewer drains. They were pouring them down the middle of the street. They were pouring them down hillside. Like, I'm surprised that half of the water in Kentucky wasn't just getting people drunk and
Right.
showering in whiskey, because they were literally putting hundreds of thousands of gallons into the streets, onto the grass, wherever they could pour it. It costs a lot of money to get, like I said, he spends over $1 million just in barrels. You got to pay for your barrels. You got to pay for a rick house. You got to pay for your tax stamps. You got to pay for, it's not cheap to produce even a 2-year-old bourbon,
Mm-hmm.
let alone you get that clear spirit. Here's some corn. Day later, here's a bottle of Tito's. They're done. There's nothing else they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Where to get what I'm drinking right now, it's a minimum of a 3 to 4 year process just from growing the corn, distilling it out, milling, mashing, getting the barrels from the cooperage. It takes a lot, but what I think the biggest thing was when they started to tell people this is not available. The allocation fact. There's nothing allocated about that bottle of Weller 12.
Right.
Not one damn thing.
Right.
If they wanted to provide us with it every single day on the shelf for the next 10 years, I can guarantee that we could have Weller 12 on the shelf for next 10 years anywhere you wanted to get it. But you tell people they can't have something in their mind just goes crazy. And Blanton's is the same way. Like we said earlier, it's a single barrel. No one's having the same bottle of Blanton's every time they have it. But something in their mind says, this is the very first single barrel. Every time I call a liquor store, they say they don't have it. This is something that you can't get.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that really started to bring it up. And I also think I don't want to say the liquor industry, but we went from, how do I say this without sounding bad? We're not Russia, but we're a pretty drunk country. Alcohol and tobacco rules the majority of our lives in the United States. We use alcohol and tobacco for one reason or another. 9 out of 10 people you talk to probably drink or smoke cigarettes or vape or whatever it is. And I think people started to try to take alcohol more easy. I don't know if that's the way I want to say it, but yeah, they want to use it, but they don't want it to taste like shit. They don't want it to taste like a $5 bottle of Burnett's that when you drink it, it tastes like cat piss and soaked in blueberries.
Right.
Same was with whiskey. You don't want to just have moonshine at 180 proof and burns for 20 minutes when you light it on fire. You want to have something that tastes good.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So an apple pie moonshine started coming down through the mountains, and then it started turning into, okay, I'm taking down these apple trees that I'm getting the apple that I'm filling my moonshine with, and I can throw this chopped up wood into this barrel with this moonshine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then it started to bleed out into the bourbon world. Why can't we burn the inside of this barrel lightly instead of charring it? And now it's going to make it toasted. It's going to make it sweet. It's going to make it more appealing to a person. And then
Right.
they're like, well, why can't we do this and this and this? And people started finding these things enjoyable to sit down. It wasn't just, it's been a long day. How quick can I get trashed tonight? It was, oh man, I'm excited to taste how this is with my cigar. And
Yeah.
it became more about drinking and more of an experience. Bourbon became an experience, and I would say this came across in the late 90s to where people really started to try to enjoy spirits instead of it's just another thing.
Well-
I've had a long day. Let's get drunk and
Was it the
pass out.
90s or was it during when people actually started opening up speakeasies and they knew that they would have to have that, everyone loved the bourbon. So
Well, and it's funny that you say opening up speakeasies because there's a lot of people that will say, well, this opened up this and this and this time, but we have so much available to us just in the palm of our hand.
Mhm.
A lot of speakeasies, if you look online and Reddit reviews and whatnot, I guarantee you whatever year they said that speakeasy was open, it's been open a lot
longer,
longer
yeah.
than
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
man.
Coins the term
There's-
speakeasy.
Exactly.
Yeah. Right.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was a big thing too. During Prohibition, people didn't really care about vodkas. They didn't really care about neutral spirits. They wanted the whiskey that they were told they couldn't have. Big speakeasy, it's not a speakeasy anymore, but if you go down to Purdue's campus, there's a place called Harry's Chocolate Shop.
Can you tell them what a speakeasy is real quick?
A speakeasy during Prohibition was a place that you went, it was always a front. Like down in Purdue, it was Harry's Chocolate Shop. Up front, you could buy chocolates and whatnot. You knew what to say to the person behind the bar. They lock the front door, they pull the rug. You can still see it to this day. They pull up the floor, you climb down a ladder, and they have an entire ass bar down there. And if you wanted a drink during Prohibition, you went into Harry's Chocolate Shop, you ordered a particular kind of chocolate. They locked all the doors. They made sure no one could see in. They let you down into the basement. They shut you back down, put the rug, opened up the business, and you continued selling chocolates. And that's how people drank. And it was another one of those, you can't have this. So people wanted it.
FOMO.
FOMO, exactly. Why shouldn't I spend $100 to go sit in this basement and drink subpar whiskey that some guy up in the hills of Tennessee just made? Why shouldn't I? And then you're like, oh, you look back at it. If that were me, I'd be like, that sounds fucking terrible.
Right.
That just does not sound good to me. But that's what they had. You got caught drinking alcohol during Prohibition, geez, you're done. You might as well be caught drinking and driving nowadays.
Right.
Sarah Monroe Madonna says speakeasy equals a good time.
Damn right it does.
Yeah.
I'm sure like back then you were still looking to have that social atmosphere.
Right. You met people
You
probably at
met
a
people
speakeasy.
during the speakeasy. You all shared the spirit together.
Yep.
You lost what you once had. You were
Yep.
socializing, and I guess that's where the bourbon world for me came from. Is not only is it Americans' lifeblood on
Mhm.
how it got here, but people into bourbon is what you did. You went out and you socialized,
Mhm.
whether it had been over the bourbon, over like how shitty your job was, or like what you're going through that particular year. It was
Right.
it was really a good time to just
Right.
get away from the world.
Right.
They couldn't. I wouldn't be able to text you and be like, "Hey man, what are you doing today?" They didn't have that. I wasn't even close to being alive, but they didn't have that. You wanted to socialize, you walked to somebody's house,
Mhm.
or you went and you drank at a speakeasy. I mean, that was it. I mean, postcards or how whatever people did back then. I don't know. I've always had a phone, I guess. And a lot of that came down to wanting to have that. Pre-prohibition, you went to the bar, you hung out, you had a sarsaparilla and a whiskey. Well, what are you gonna do after the only thing that you could do was gone? They didn't have a casino out there. They didn't have anything
Right.
like that. The only thing they could do was go and drink and play billiards. And that they took away drinking, so bars closed, which took away any sort of games that people went and competed in, and that was literally it.
Yep.
That is what they had.
Sarah says also sticking it to the man. And which most people may not know, but it's actually a good runner-up on how NASCAR was founded. You know,
Right.
they would bottle all this stuff up in the car. They would outrun the
Mhm.
law with these swooped up cars and get it to the places that they had to go. Via it was bourbon or moonshine.
Mhm.
It was all telegraphed through transportation of risk over reward, right? It
And
was
their risk was usually higher than the
the
reward because
reward.
a lot of times they souped them cars out and they tried to make them as light as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look back into when they used to run and bootleg those things by the jars, they would run at night and they did not run with headlights.
Right.
Guys would drive back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and they would try to memorize that path. They would go in the absolute pitch black, running 70, whatever's fast to them back then, running
Mhm.
70 mile an hour in the pitch black, and they just
It's pretty
knew
fast.
where to go.
Right.
And
But the risk was there.
yeah, it was there.
I mean, people ran mountain, and I mean, you make a wrong turn,
Mm-hmm.
It's a
say,
wrap.
going
It's a
through the
wrap.
Smokies,
Yeah,
it's a
you're
wrap,
done.
for
You're
sure,
done.
You're
Yeah.
done.
And Revolt was just wondering, could moonshine actually cause blindness? Meaning, is there an alcohol out there that could literally cause some sort of medical condition?
It's gonna kill you before it makes you go blind. I mean,
Right? Because alcohol
Yeah.
poisoning.
my palms ain't hairy either, but
Right,
Right.
right. But alcohol poisoning is a real thing. I think my
it
wife,
is.
who's the doctor of the family, she would better to give me those analysis. But I'm going to say alcohol poisoning is definitely something that can happen.
It is real.
Yeah, it is real. You can literally drink yourself to death. But
Mhm.
blindness,
I don't think so.
I think it's an old wives' tale. But
But Sarah said something interesting to me. She said, "Stick it to the man." So sticking it to the man, they did, and the man was like, "They're sticking it to us. We got to find a way to get our cut because this is clearly a thing the American people are going to want."
Mhm.
Is that why you think they said, "Okay, let's regulate this because there's no way we can control it at this point. We know people are still drinking out there
Of course.
and or they're doing illegal activities."
well,
course.
they're the same ones that were still drinking too. How many of you think governments like confiscated barrels and was like, after work, Bobby, let's just go back and
Mhm.
enjoy this spirit, you know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, started making dirt roads. They started taxing roads, people that are building them. They started taxing whiskey. They tax tea. They tax weed up in Michigan. They tax. It seems every 5-10 years there's something else that we're sticking it to the man.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But then the man comes right back around and
And
sticks it to us. But
And
we're
by
like,
taxing it.
Yeah.
oh, we got them to do what we wanted.
Right.
Now we're still getting fucked in the end.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
yeah.
It's just a mind manipulation, and they're like, we're gonna do just enough to where you think you've got the upper hand, but we've actually got the upper hand.
Yeah.
If
Mhm.
it weren't for taxes, that $100 bottle of smoke wagon was $50.
Good.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I bet it cost every bit of. I couldn't tell you how much it cost for them just to approve a label,
Mhm.
Mhm.
but by how long some of these places have had the exact same label for 50 years, I imagine it's not cheap. I mean, hell, even getting a liquor license to open a liquor store is absolutely insane.
Mhm.
And to put that type of decor on a bottle, like if
Mhm.
you really look at that smoke wagon bottle, that is a beautiful bottle.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
We're gonna have you back talking more bourbon. We normally end out our show with questions from the bazaar.
Okay.
And Sarah or Revote or whoever's watching, what question should we ask Bobby?
Mm.
I love this.
I like to say, have you seen this? Have you ever seen that? Or
Are you talking like whiskey white or
No,
No. We
Okay,
go
okay.
outside of the topic and the
No.
realms of the subject today,
the
sir.
outer, these are outer limits.
Outer limit questions. These are
Okay, what do you guys
These
got?
are Alfred
Well,
Hitchcock
let
Twilight
me-
Zone
Let
questions.
me see what,
While we're-
let me see what pops up first, because I don't
Okay.
want to dictate the question. So let's see what pops up.
We're gonna wait on.
Okay, while we're waiting on that,
Mhm.
let me ask you, just bourbon and whiskey related. What are your guys' favorite bottle that you've ever had?
Like I said, my favorite bourbon is Smoke Wagon.
Is it?
My favorite sweetest bourbon I will ever have is the rare breed. My favorite go-to bottle is probably going to be
If you could, I don't care what it is. If you could get Pappy every day for the rest of your life, like, what would it be? I don't care how hard it is to get now, but if you could get it anytime, what would it be?
it would have to be the Ezra Brooks Distiller
Still-
Collection.
Mine would be
Lux Row.
and mine would be Wilderness Trail Weeded.
Really?
Yep.
If I could get that Ezra Brooks Distiller Collection, I'm a happy man.
Yeah.
When we first
They're
had that
good
bottle,
barrel
it was gone the
picks.
same. It was gone the same.
Oh,
day.
yeah,
Those
we-
run at 122, don't
Yeah,
they?
no,
that one
they're
was,
easy sipper, like 90s.
It was no, it was like 100.
I was going to say the distiller's editions
Yeah.
are store
Was
picks.
it?
It was 108
they're
or
one-
10 or something
It was
like
all
that.
I know.
It
is
wasn't the
it was-
hottest, Bobby.
It was good.
Yeah, and I still have another bottle because
Two.
we bought 2 of those and 2 Rebels.
Well, he picked one up. He saw it.
yeah.
Okay, so the first question from Sarah Monroe is what's your
Shit, there it
favorite
was.
dog breed?
Oh, Huskies.
Husky.
But I've
I like
I've
Huskies.
had 3 Huskies in my day. Truthfully, I think Dachshunds are my favorite. Little wiener dogs.
Dachshunds. I
But
haven't
they're
seen
the
a Dachshund
most
in a
annoying little
dog's age.
shits that
Dotson, you said?
they're the most annoying little shits in the world. But I've
Yappy.
had Huskies and
Yeah.
they're high energy. And now that I'm in my 30s and I'm old, you
Yeah.
know, I don't think I could handle a Husky anymore, man.
Yeah.
It's like having a child.
Yeah. They're
You take her out,
it's
you
a
walk her
lifestyle.
for
But
20
they're-
minutes, and
But
you're
a,
like,
but a
"Oh."
husky is a work dog.
It's a lifestyle.
It's that dog is designed to work. I mean,
Yep.
let's be honest.
We have a Rhodesian Ridgeback, and I know Sarah had a Rhodesian Ridgeback,
Mhm.
and that's a lifestyle. They just not sitting around.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Revolt asks, have you ever heard of the story of the Kandahar giant? This is this giant in Afghanistan, and supposedly some
The red hair.
Yeah, and some Marines found it in the cave, and it killed some Marines, and they supposedly captured it. I think they supposedly captured it. Have you ever heard of that story?
I've never heard of that.
Okay.
That sounds
No.
like some German Die Glock Bell stuff over there.
Yeah,
man. What
yeah,
the hell?
Yep.
Yeah. I actually believe that it wasn't just killing. I mean, Joe could probably say whether or not, but it wasn't just killing Marines. Like, it was killing people in Kandahar. Like, it was known to be there, and it was this thing you just didn't want to go up and visit. And if you were remotely in its area,
Before you continue, this sounds
It
like
was a
a
wrap.
textbook. Something radioactive that they didn't know was radioactive, and
Yeah.
people wouldn't stay the hell away.
Right. Well, I mean, that could
Because,
very
like-
well be, but this is like well documented
It's
through
documented.
like
Mhm.
U.S.
Yeah.
Marines.
But what
Mhm.
was it?
They're saying it was a
supposedly it was
giant.
a huge person, a huge man,
Mhm.
red hair, and
Oh.
and there's like actual. So we don't know, but through what's been leaked is there's actual documentation and,
And
photos,
and it
Mhm.
actually it had a spear or
and
something. It was impaling.
impaled an actual soldier.
Yes.
No shit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, when we say giant, are we talking?
We're talking like
8 foot,
no, we're
9
talking
foots, or like
the way they described it. I want to say it was like 10 feet tall, something like that.
No, I
Okay.
think maybe taller.
Taller or something?
Yeah,
Oh, shit.
way taller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Don't quote me, but I remember that height being way taller than that.
And then
because that stuff's right. I'm into like all the weird paranormal, all your UFO,
So let me-
all your
Okay,
weird
yeah.
shit
So
like that.
so
this
let
is-
me ask you
this
this.
Ask
is
some
something I'm
different
about to go
questions.
home.
Okay, so ask deeper questions, but let me
I'm
ask
about
you
to
this.
invest so
Let
much
me ask
time
you
into
this.
this right now.
Is there anything that you ever seen out there that's challenged your reality or challenged your belief where it just like shook your paradigm and then that could not be possible?
No, I don't think so.
Okay,
Nothing that I've been like, okay, that's what I'm a man of science. I look at something before I shit my when I see something crazy, I shit my pants immediately. And then I'm like, okay, but that was probably a satellite. If I didn't look away, it'd probably I try my best to give
a reasonable
a
explanation.
reasonable explanation before I'm like, that was not supposed to happen. I got to go tell everybody. No, I need to back up. I need to be like, okay, maybe I just saw an airplane, or maybe I try my best to give a reasonable explanation before I go out there. I've had friends that have seen crazy stuff. I mean, just my buddy Jeff after Buds and Bourbon, he said he saw some do a crazy maneuver up in the sky while I'm sitting there taking a pee behind my house.
Right.
I believe him.
Right.
Do I think that he saw a UFO do some weird 360 and take off behind a tree?
Mm-hmm.
Nah, no.
Do you believe in that? I mean, but
Absolutely.
okay.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
So with the Pentagon coming, okay, hold on.
Oh, now you're getting into my.
With the Pentagon coming forward and all this stuff coming out about UFOs, the Tic Tac, the Go Fast, the Nimble, the Nimitz, all these videos that have surfaced, do you think that the U.S. military servicemen and women are lying about that? And do you
Absolutely.
or do you believe that they actually
We
saw
put
stuff?
hundreds of millions of dollars into making sure that we weren't allowed to see it back in the 60s. And we were just cool with all of our taxpayer dollars going into something that we know nothing about.
So
Like,
wait a minute.
what was the point in us having, like, just recently? I don't know if you've heard of ATIP. That's their
Right,
yes,
right.
That's
Advanced
Lou.
advanced aerospace engineering.
Yep.
Okay.
So Louis Alessandro, who
Mhm.
was the guy that headed that,
Mm-hmm.
outside of his military experience before that, he had no reason to be dealing with anything UFO wise. But they're like, he's about the most qualified.
Right.
But then you look back at older shit like Bob Lazar. I
Mhm.
don't know how. I mean, you can get real.
Yeah, yeah.
Bob Lazar. You hear a lot of stories, and you're like, okay, this guy just told me some alien stuck a finger up his butt, and now he can see everything and knows how everybody feels and blah, blah, blah. No. But Bob Lazar, for the last 40, 50 years, his story
It's
has
consistent.
been that
The-
consistent story.
yeah.
That does not change.
And
even a
Element
little bit.
15 actually
Exists.
Element 15 exists. They
Yeah.
just
came
don't have a
around years
stable-
later after he said it.
They just don't have a stable put out for it.
Right.
That guy, his life is so screwed at this point, but he talks a lot about not knowing.
Mm-hmm.
They kept him as in the dark as they could.
Right.
When they briefed him on everything, he was like, they told me stuff that I could very tell was obviously bullshit. This doesn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then he's like, till I got down there, because he wasn't at Area 51. He was at the S.O.R base, which was 3 miles outside of
Right.
Area 51.
Right.
And he was like, it was at the point that I sat there. He was with Barry. Barry was the guy that was there. And the only reason Bob Lazar got brought onto that was rumor that the person before him had died.
Mm-hmm.
There's all sorts of speculation to why he died, blah, blah, blah. Bob Lazar, his story is consistent through and through, and they tried to silence that out.
Yeah. By
They
discrediting
went out,
him.
he had
Mhm.
no birth certificate.
Uh-huh.
He did not go to Cornell or whatever school it was. He didn't attend that MIT. He didn't work at the Los Alamos
Mhm.
testing facility.
Mhm.
He just didn't exist. And all of a
So-
sudden, his
so-
story went completely blank. And then some random person that was like, I think this guy's telling the truth. He went through old directory phone books
Mhm.
and they looked into the Los Alamos testing facility and they said, in this directory, this is Bob Lazar's name.
That's Jeremy
From-
Corbell, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And, and Knapp.
God, I am
George Knapp.
so
And George
being
Knapp.
happy that you.
Yeah.
Well, Bob
Mm.
even says, right, because it was so heavily compartmentalized,
Mhm.
he was only allowed so much access within his realm,
Mm-hmm.
meaning above him, there was other,
Projects going on.
yeah, and he was not privy to.
Nope.
So do you think Bob Lazar is the smoking gun to all of this?
Absolutely.
Really?
Well, everything he said up to this point, it's been spot on.
Right.
If they hadn't proved that he existed, whether it be at Los Alamos, whether it be that he got his interview with the GSE or whatever they called themselves at S.O.R, if that hadn't been proved, I truly believe Bob Lazar would not exist.
Didn't he
They
even,
would have snuffed him out so
didn't
damn
he even
fast.
say
Yeah.
that they had like a hand scan type
Mhm.
Right, they had-
technology?
they had
And it read the length of your bones because the bones in your finger are as unique as the thumbprint
Print.
on your hand.
Right.
Okay.
So
right,
it would
yeah.
measure
the bone
your
density
the
or
bone density, and everyone called him absolute batshit crazy. And then 20 years later,
we got biometric
they
scanners.
got biometric
Yeah.
scanners, and he was like,
That's
I
what we
saw
had.
those.
Yeah.
Right, right.
So
And they just discredited him so hard. But then once all these things start, no, he was at Los Alamos. Here's his directory. No, he had this interview. Here's the interview paper that had been filed away.
Mhm.
And they're like, nothing we can do now. And they just kind of let him go out and do his thing. They can't snuff the dude.
right,
He
He
right.
says
'cause
it in
'cause
almost all of his interviews.
Yeah, he's already
like,
made that public appearance.
yeah, he was like, if I get snuffed out now, this is going to be way too obvious.
Mhm.
And
So
then
he just goes out and does what he wants to do.
and real quick, Sarah's wanting to know, never any paranormal encounters, anything like that.
That
I don't know what
that
I wanna-
suggests that you encounter something and you don't know what to make of
Because of your analytical mind, you don't want to say anything about it.
No, not necessarily that. I'm very open. I'm 31. Back in my 20s, I did a fair amount of acid and mushrooms.
it. Okay.
So I had seen some things when I was younger that I was like, okay, no, I'm very clearly at my peak and I need to drink some water and sit my ass
What
down.
did you see, Bob?
I wish I could tell you. It all kind of soils together. You see, oh man, it's even hard to describe it.
I think alien disclosure is DMT,
Dude,
but maybe that's a different conversation.
I think that's a different
that's
conversation.
a whole nother conversation. I
Conversation.
want to be here.
Okay,
for that one.
so we won't touch the psychonaut experience right now.
but wait, can you explain what you saw?
No, but wait, hold on,
Okay,
hold on.
okay.
This will be good for when he comes back.
Okay.
Risky wants to know, what would you consider the weirdest thing you ever seen, or at least the most unexplainable?
I don't even know how to describe it. I was at a music festival once, and I accidentally, however you want, I accidentally did 10 hits of acid.
Okay.
Longest 3 days of my
I
life.
don't, Bob.
And-
We're gonna save
Do
the
you need some
psychonaut.
more of this Negro juice,
That's-
Bob?
that's what I was
Because
gonna say, like-
how do you
and-
accidentally take 10 tabs of acid?
I'm sure that could kill a person. Baby girl, if you're still up watching this, can 10 tabs of acid destroy the human psyche? And also, would you ever drink bourbon that was poured down an old Negro's toes? Because at this point, I think you're subject to do anything.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, there ain't much that I won't do, man. I was just like,
Okay, hold on.
yeah.
Maybe we
Hold
should
on,
not have
hold on,
started with the
hold on,
bourbon. It
hold on.
started with the psychonaut.
Hold on.
Okay.
Risky asked a question.
Yeah.
Sarah asked a question.
Paranormal.
okay.
Anything paranormal.
Anything paranormal, but
No.
I definitely have to know what happened with the 10 tabs of acid.
Let me answer that question quick,
Okay.
and then I'll hit the 10 hits. Paranormal. When I was younger, my mom and dad said there was always some poltergeist in the house. Power would go out, you'd go down, flip the breaker. Nobody else's power goes out. As a kid, I'm like, it's just some random stuff. That's just what it is. And as a kid, mind you, running around with the pastor's kid all the time, I also at that point had a sense of religion that I
Adhere to.
adhered to. I always would try to put things into that, be like, okay, well, this is obviously this or this or this or this. Well, I remember, so the basement, you had to go down the stairs, and then the light switch was at the bottom of the stairs. And as a kid, it was always we had a freezer down there, so we had popsicles, fudge pops, whatever. Now, as a kid, it was always that, okay, light switch is at the bottom of the stairs. Hit that shit and run as fast as you can to the top, because if you don't, you're probably going to die and something's going to drag you back down. It's just one of those kid things. Just like you hear something at night, you cover up with the covers. Can't get me.
Mhm.
But I remember grabbing my popsicle, middle of summer. I grabbed a few for my friends outside. I walk up the stairs and I stop and I turn because I'm like, shit, I forgot to turn off the light. And when I turned around, that light went off. Now, as a kid, I'm probably like 10, 12 years old. I'm like, okay, now is when I really need to sprint up the stairs and get the hell out of here.
Right.
And I explained it to my dad, and he was just like, duh, yeah, that's just the poltergeist. And I'm like, you mean the shit you've been telling me for like all of my childhood's real? Because that light just shut off on its own and the rest of the power in the house is good.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that just happens. I'm like,
Huh.
I'm terrified now.
Okay,
Yeah.
but
And
that's
that's about like the only thing paranormal that is.
but that's
really
little
happened.
Bobby, analytical Bobby.
Exactly.
Was there an emotion that made you feel fright and run up the stairs? It was just a light turning off. It could have been a power surge or a power glitch.
It could have been.
Was there an emotion you can remember that said, hey, I'm naturally scared. This is not just something that is a glitch. I'm running up these stairs.
I didn't. It's like anytime I turned that light off,
Mhm.
I was up those stairs quick.
Okay.
Mhm.
So you already had
I
a
just
natural.
went through a flight of stairs. It's just a kid's thing.
Right.
You flick off the light. I don't have a light switch up
Yeah.
here.
And a kid's imagination can be very,
Very vivid.
It
very
is.
vivid.
So it was light switch, run. Don't look behind you. Don't hang your foot over the bed in the middle of the night. Don't look under your bed after 10:30. Don't just the weird shit that you heard as you were a kid, and that I just watched a light turn off, but yet I can very still clearly see the kitchen light still on at the top of the stairs. And I'm
Okay.
like, okay, get the hell out of here. And
Right.
that was
I think that answers Risky's question. So now,
that. I don't know
yeah,
if it's
no,
paranormal.
no,
That was
answers
it. That was Sarah's question.
well, that was Sarah's, but he also asked, was there anything, let's see here, to be considered weird things that has been seen or most unexplainable? Like I think you said that was like the most unexplainable thing you've seen, or do you have something else?
It depends on how deep you guys want to get into this.
Okay, we don't have a whole lot of time.
Okay,
That's
we
what I
don't
was
have a
gonna
whole
say.
lot of time.
We don't,
left.
but
You got to run me. You got to run me through
you
these.
got us run us through the 10 tabs
10
of
tabs.
acid.
Okay, so I'm at Electric Forest.
It's a heroic dose. You know that, right?
Oh, trust me, I am as small of a person as I am. I very much so know that was a very heroic dose. I've multiple times before that done 2 hits.
Mhm.
Done my own thing. I've done 2 hits plus ate the mushrooms when I was younger. Not as easy as it was,
Right.
but 10 hits.
Sarah says she saw clockwork elves. Or no, you saw clockwork elves. Not she, you.
You didn't know what you saw at Forest because at that music festival, everybody's dressed up as just about anything you can imagine. There's people dressed up as Mike Wazowski and one-eyed little green dudes, and you're like,
Is that real or not?
do I walk up and like smack him? Do I like, what do you do? And you just kind of stand it. And I've been on the other side of the fence and I'm like, that dude over there is very clearly off his ass. Why do you say that? And then you look over at him, he's just like,
The panic.
and I'm
look.
like, that's
Yeah.
probably
Okay.
what I look like
Okay.
for 2 days
Okay,
straight.
Bobby. Okay. Walk us through this. You get to this show. Who has the acid and how does it come up that you want to take 10 fucking tabs?
no,
of this?
accidentally.
Okay, so walk us through that.
I used to go in a full polar bear costume and I used to make enamel hat pins.
Okay.
And hat pins are big in the EDM scene.
Okay.
And I'd make a bunch of limited ones that you were only going to be able to get if they were from me.
Okay.
And I used to go around masked and I would find people that were just vibing, having a good time. And I'd be like, hey, here's this pin. People love that shit. Absolutely love it. Well, I went up to this one guy and he's kind of just sitting on the ground. He's got a smile on his face and he's just enjoying he's just enjoying the moment. He's just happy to be there.
Mhm.
I went up, I gave him a pin. He looked at me and he said, do you want to do a drop of acid with me? Sure. So he pulls out his vial, loads it up. He tilts his head back, one drop. Cool. He goes, tilt your head back. I take off my polar bear, I tilt my head back, and he squeezes that eyedropper. And I mean, he squeezes the whole eyedropper in my mouth.
Oh, God.
And I'm like, dude, what the did you do? And he goes, buckle up, dude. You just did like 10 hits of acid. And I'm like, okay. Okay. Well, I'm going to be good. I'll walk back to my camp. I'm going to be fine. I'm going to let everyone know that I just did 10 hits of acid. I never made it back to my camp.
Oh, my.
I ended up at some other random people's. I truly can very barely remember I can remember spots that stuck with me because it was I did not sleep for 3 days. It was one of those where like, I just don't want to be tripping right now. I am done. It's been 12 hours.
Right.
That Porta John just took me 8 hours to go and take a piss in, which
Yeah.
was probably like 3 minutes. And then I stood in the sunbaked Porta John on 10 hits of acid trying to take a pee for what I thought was 2 hours. And then I go out and they have the Ferris wheel, and it was pretty much right in front of where our camp was. Now, our camp, we had a guy and he took, like, if you go to an elementary school, they have those half dome bars and you climb up them. Well, he built those, but reinforced them and they could hold hammocks. And that was like where you camped. You would hang 20 different hammocks up in this little dome. It's where you hung. Well, we would go up and we'd sit on top of it and we'd just watch people go by, smoke a doobie, chat with people, chat with the cops. The cops up there were awesome. And I remember looking up at the Ferris wheel and they were different colored carts. And I remember watching this one and it went, and all of a sudden it didn't go in the circle. It went up and it went down. And it was like I was, for lack of a better explanation, Rainbow Road from Mario Kart. And I remember walking away from camp and trying to follow where this particular swing from the Ferris wheel was going. 3 days later, I'm passed out in my hammock in the dome. I wake up. I'm like, oh, hey, guys, blah, blah, blah. It's 2:30 in the afternoon. And they're like, are you okay? And I'm
3
like,
days later.
3 days later. Now, apparently, I was awake for the majority of this 3 days. And they're like, are you good? And I'm like, yeah. I mean, it was pretty crazy, but I'm fine. They're like, you just went to bed an hour ago. I'm like, okay. And you came on the first night and said someone gave you 10 hits of acid, and we just saw you for the first time an hour ago. I'm like, right on, man.
Yeah.
And I tried to describe to them what was happening. They're all like, have you eaten anything? Have you been drinking water? My face is like covered in brown and dust and everything like that. I'm like, no, I'm cool. I could go for a grilled cheese right now. But like,
Right.
why are you guys freaking out? And they're like, some of the stuff you were saying, man, it was like, we don't even know if you were here at this festival. I'm like, I don't either. I mean, it was,
Whoa.
I saw so much, and it's all just trees and lights. And I caught myself at one point. I met this girl who helped me to the Porta John, what I would think is day 2 of my trip, maybe something like that.
Oh my
And
God.
I'm about 40 yards from the Porta Johns. And it, according to everyone back there, it took me about an hour to get to the Porta John and back. It'd be like walking up to the house, peeing and coming back. Well, this girl comes up to me, and I still talk to her this day. But apparently, I was trying to walk there and I couldn't see anything. So I'm like,
Here, talk it to the mic, Bobby.
and I'm like stepping like there's no floor, just real slow. And then I'd look, and then I'm like, okay. And then I would feel in front of me like 3-4 people. I'm like, okay.
Bobby,
And then
where
I'd move a little bit farther
where
forward.
was the
and
floor, Bobby?
I had no idea.
What
There
did it
was
look
no
like?
floor.
What,
There was no
my
floor.
God.
It literally looked like I was just in this nothingness. I
Yeah.
could see people around me, but everything else was completely black. And I was literally, I had to physically place my foot down and be like, okay, I'm not gonna, I don't know, acid thought fall off the face of the earth.
Right.
I didn't, thought process was way off. But I'm sitting there and this girl comes up. She goes, do you need help getting to the bathroom? I'm like, oh my God, how did you know I gotta go to the bathroom? Well, the porta potty is about like 10 feet that way, and you're
Yeah.
just really slowly making your way. And I'm like, I definitely need some help. She helped me in there. I got in there, and I have never had so much trouble taking a pee in my life than I did in a sun-baked 150-degree porta john.
Oh my God,
My
Bob.
God.
While also just hearing all of this bass and everything while you're just acid already makes you just everything going on at once, and then you're just in this
Hypersensitive.
tiny little area, and you're like,
Yeah.
and I remember trying to unlock. I couldn't get the thing to flip, and I'm like kicking at it before I realized that I had already unlocked it, and my hand is on the handle. I am the one that's holding the door shut, and I'm like trying to kick it, and I'm like,
God.
"Whoo!"
Do not do 10 accidentally.
Do not take acid from
Rounds
an
of
person.
acid.
No, don't do it. Or do. It was
Or
it,
do.
It was, it
Or
was still
do.
pretty
We-
fun. It was
We
still
will
pretty
not
fun.
condone this on symptoms
no,
of
no.
reality. Not at all.
Good
We
Lord.
just started this channel. God damn it, Bobby. I will not
Right.
lose it over your goddamn bitching on acid. Oh,
But there is one life to live, so do what you got to do.
do what you got to do
Yeah.
responsibly.
All right, look, we're gonna get out here. It was a late one. I think we streamed for
Probably 3
Probably
hours.
3 hours.
probably 3
Yeah.
hours. We're gonna have
Yeah.
we're gonna have Bobby back. And then tomorrow we're gonna stream again live. We're gonna have a really good guest as well. The channel Why You Are You, whoever's still watching this, and whenever you watch it, go look at a YouTube channel called Why You Are You. And Ben is a really good speaker and a really good person to follow if you have hiccups and barricades in the middle of the road for you. I mean,
I concur, Doctor.
you'll see why tomorrow.
With that, yeah,
Bob,
you have been
I think
brilliant.
we have to have you back.
You tell me when.
And I think we're gonna have to just talk about something other than bourbon, because clearly
You have more to you, sir.
Oh,
Than,
there's-
more
I
than
am-
meets the eye.
There's a lot.
Oh no, yeah. Well, I think we can
Yeah.
all gather that there is.
There's some things you can't say when you're selling a bottle of whiskey to a guy
Yeah.
at your place of work.
yeah. You kind of almost left me speechless.
Yeah. Jeez.
But now I know who you are, and funny enough that our music is close to EDM and
Mm-hmm.
meditative sounds. So I think
Sarah wants to meet our mom. She's like, you guys got to put your mom. We have to
Yeah.
introduce mom.
she is coming to the show.
Yeah,
by
she
the way,
is coming. We have
Yeah.
not forgot.
Yeah. But thanks.
Appreciate you
thank
guys
you,
having
Bobby.
me.
Yeah,
For
thank
real.
you for everything,
Thank you
for the knowledge of bourbon,
education.
America's lifeblood.
Mhm.
And I think people needed to know, like, our hobby and our pastime, and this is one of them. Bourbon is we hold it true and dear. We are not big drinkers,
Mm-mm.
but we are supporters of the American history behind
traditions.
behind bourbon. It is something that everybody should enjoy.
How often? How often do
least
you guys
once.
get a free chance to like leave for a day?
More often than not.
Yeah.
So we did when I was at Gaze. There was a place called Bourbon 30,
Mhm.
and it's just a bunch of MGP barrels, and you blend them, and you
Mm.
make your own percentage, and you make a blend. You can do 1 bottle, you can do 10 bottles, you can do 100 bottles. It'd be sick if you guys went down there,
Yeah.
Mhm.
made your own blend,
Label
put your
it and
podcast
everything.
number on it.
Yeah.
You can do 10 bottles, you can do just 2 bottles for you guys, something to drink. But
Made our own.
I
And
think it'd be
Yeah.
badass to have a blend
Yeah.
that you guys
And
made.
Yeah,
give
yeah.
a few bottles away to the
yeah,
listeners.
yeah. Yeah. Which kudos to Sarah Monroe. She's over 100 comments and she got a little star and a award on our YouTube channel. So thank
Love
you.
it.
Thank you, Sarah, for
For everything.
everything.
Um,
Yeah.
Shit.
Oh, sweet.
We'll catch y'all on
We'll
the flip.
catch y'all on the flip. I hope you enjoyed. I'm going to bed after that.
Yeah.
Try not to eat any damn acid is what I'm going to try to
At
do.
least not 10 of them.
Yeah.
Jeez.